Doesn't sound like it. Thank you. Okay, great. Thank you for coming. So we will get on with the main conversation in a little bit. Thank you for your patience as we fix everything, including microphones, live stream, and everything else. There'll be people joining late because apparently architects always join events late. Every time we've run this, we start automatically half an hour late. But so before I introduce the main event, we decided to have a discussion kind of very informally about the state of spatial computation tools, partly to celebrate and thank Greg and Bentley Systems for sponsoring the event in this fantastic venue. So, you guys can present yourself, I'll present myself, and then we'll just have a discussion about the state of spatial computation tools, whatever that means. Greg.
Great. Okay. You guys can hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, excellent. Hi, I'm Greg Demchak with Bentley Systems. I'm our VP of Emerging Technology and R&D. And thank you all for coming here to 8 Bishopsgate. We just moved into this building in November, and we're actually up on the 43rd floor, and very nice views of the city. So we thought it was important to actually have our office in central London where we can kind of appreciate the role of architecture in this city. And I've been with Bentley Systems for about 6 years now. Came in through the acquisition of a software called Synchro, which is a 4D construction visualization tool. Before that, I worked for, this is probably want to kill me for this one or not. I don't know, if I worked for 12 years as a product designer for Revit. Revit Technology is a startup. You can blame me for a lot of the user experience on that product. But I'm an architect by background, actually. Got recruited into Revit Technology as a young graduate out of MIT's Design and Computation group, where my thesis advisor was the late Bill Mitchell, if you're familiar with Bill Mitchell's work. And my intent was to always try and bring and hopefully, empower architects to use software to make better performing, projects. So that's I think in a nutshell.
Yeah. So I'm Shajay. I work for Zadid Architects, where I've been leading the computation and design team for a research group for the last 17 plus years, and we've also been innovating on trying to innovate on workflow and technology to support like the kind of architecture that the company wants to do. And I also teach at the Design Research Lab. I see many familiar faces, a course that Patrick co-founded maybe 25 years now. 25 years ago, and so there's always been a deep congenial relationship between design research that happens in the Design Research Lab and also the kind of experimentation that we have been doing at Zadid Architects. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
My name is John Minicherry. I'm an architect and environmental scientist. Basically, I started my career as a sort of policymaker and environmental scientist at the United Nations working on urban morphology, and then realized that you couldn't do very much without creating more things rather than just legislating. And so post-professionally trained in architecture, started teaching architecture at the Stockholm Architecture School and practicing as a kind of specialist environmental architect in Stockholm and the Nordic region. And as I was doing sort of more and more larger projects with larger offices, including Bjarke as he went supernova, and White and other large offices in the Nordics, I realized basically two things: that architecture would need to have a deep integration with the state of the economy, logistically, financially, if it was actually going to contribute to sustainability. You can't just make green buildings, you have to make them drive green patterns of consumption. So I started a company that attempts to contribute that, called Last Meter, a design technology company that integrates consumption systems into buildings. And I also realized that the only thing that would really matter to make architecture contribute to sustainability was design technology. There's just too many variables. There's too much to know and too much to change so fast. So I got good at design technology. And as I realized that my Last Meter company and design technology for sustainability was moving too slowly, and the pandemic hit, and I started a podcast, which Ken Pimentel and the Epic Games team started sponsoring because they said this is pretty interesting content. And at that point, I was like, well, what is happening in this technology space that is outside the conventional remit of architecture and urban design? And I started looking into spaces like the metaverse and movie making and so forth, and I thought, holy shit, there's a convergence here that people inside architecture are not talking about. and there's a competence inside architecture that isn't moving out to these other domains. And as I explained, that was sort of the starting point for this company, but it's also the starting point for this conversation, which is, I mean, the way I see, and I think increasing numbers of people, particularly architecture students, see spatial technology, and certainly there's a kind of the founding premise of Treasury is that there's a convergence of many types of spatial technology, and so this is the start of the conversation, me segueing from babbling about myself, to invite you guys to challenge this presumption. I think what's happening is that there is an infrastructural convergence of technologies that each of which has a spatial character into an infrastructural layer, which in its totality you call spatial computing or spatial technology, that will have a very profound change, will lead to lots of change in society on every level, and it's sort of a bit invisible because everyone in the technical silos sort of thinks, oh, my bit is changing, but I'm going to cling to what I know, and my bit is changing, and I'm going to cling to what I know. But actually it's becoming kind of commodified technology over the internet-based society in the same way that if you look at how Google started or how Amazon AWS started, essentially it was a massive convergence of lots of things. There was compute, there was storage, there was internet, there was mobile, and suddenly all combine that we have disposable commodity compute, right? No one thinks that they're going to have a server rack or we're going to run their own, DRAM, plugins. You just buy compute, literally on demand. And that convergence leads to tremendous unlock, I think. No one really knows what it is to be a backend, like a hardware-type backend developer anymore because it's such a composite of skills. And I think that's what's happening in spatial technology. So my premise, as I start the conversation, is that there is convergence. And the way that I see it and the way that we see it is you sort of roughly take these 6 or 7 or 8 categories. So you've got geosensing and mapping. You've got kind of like reality capture of many different sorts. I mean, just to give one example of how reality capture is changing very quickly. Literally in the last few years, nerfing became real. Now Gaussian splatting is happening. LiDAR is upstepping and becoming blended with photogrammetry, and it's just a huge convergence, and no one really talks about it. So that's reality capture. You have obviously design tools, which are moving exceptionally slowly, except for what obviously Bentley is doing. And you have rendering. I mean, Unreal Engine is clearly one of the most profound pieces of technology any normal human will ever see. It's more powerful than most entirely of what the military has in terms of the number of technologies and the speed at which it has evolved and the power of things it can do. And then you have visualization, immersion, fabrication. So my sense is that all these things are converging onto kind of a commodified infrastructure layer, and actually competency from one domain is going to be quite interchangeable, or at least blendable with competencies from other domains. Does that resonate, or is that me, just kind of like pitching something grander than is real or practical?
No, for me as a software solution provider, this has been resonating with us, and actually we've been experimenting with this premise of sort of infinite compute cloud. And actually the journey started, you wouldn't expect it, but Bentley Systems, we actually applied for, Ken's up here, we applied for an Epic mega grant as a software provider to kind of get hands-on with Unreal Engine. And actually that whole process, what it led us to realize is that we couldn't work with files. So we very quickly hit the limitations of things like DataSmith and file and the old, working with file FBX, and we very quickly moved to a cloud-based solution where we do the processing of the tiling system in the cloud and then stream the content into Unreal Engine. And basically at that point we started to realize we could stream practically anything into Unreal Engine. So whether it was a BIM file, it could be a Rhino file, it could be a Revit file, it could be a MicroStation file. Then we started bringing NERF, Gaussian splat data into it, photogrammetry, point clouds. And in terms of the compute and the monetization too, you'll see this, we started looking at different ways of streaming content, and now we're using a format called Cesium, 3D tiling system, which is what Google's now using to open up Google Earth. Mm. And so if you look at the Google business model now, if you put the Cesium plugin, and want to call Google Earth, okay, then you just get a transparent transaction feed. It's like turning on the energy. Yeah. And now you've got Google Earth able to stream into Unreal Engine. And so we've taken the same approach with our platform, where again, we're not yet to sort of generative design, but if you've produced a design, we can now take that content and stream it into the game engine. And we're trying to make sort of that process quite easy. And then in the end, that becomes just a data stream that could be part of your, consumption. A bit like turning on a channel to Netflix or Disney or something. It's just content streaming in. So yeah, I think we learned, in some ways, like YouTube, but now we're able to stream large, huge amounts of geometric content. So, and that's all, again, running on cloud and edge.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've been trying to champion this kind of, let's say, learn a lot from the computer graphics world, and adapt those tools to do our architecture for a very long time. And the primary motivation to do that is to have a very high throughput of design experimentation, which is typically not, or it's not been possible before, and not at the rate that we wanted in so-called BIM platforms or software that are meant for architects, right? Or within quotes, meant for architects. And so a lot of the computer graphics world, movie making privileges user experience, and even the fact that the Maya file is called a scene is very interesting because, Patrick perhaps is going to talk a lot about this. We've always conceived of architecture as organizing the space around the activity, and so there's always this idea of a scene, and also that we can experiment quite rapidly with formal capacities like subdivision modeling, which is available in Maya for 20 plus years now, and so that's how we got into that world. And another reason we were interested in that world was because it seemed to be progressing so rapidly. Every year there's new stuff in Maya compared to new stuff happening in the architect world for every 10 years, right? And so that was also very exciting to be part of something that is not it's growing so rapidly. And at some stage, it also happened that computer graphics itself was getting saturated, and they started looking at new avenues to exercise all of that research and apply all of that research, even in universities. That's the second layer where we got more excited with this world that is coming from the computer graphics industry. And so now we see a lot of congeniality between cutting edge research in robotic fabrication and so-called architectural geometry and geometry processing, which none of that is actually happening in the architecture software domain, but this kind of convergence, and so we want to be obviously part of that extended experimentation, and research, and therefore also be compatible with any new AI stuff that's going to be added on top. And so, yeah, I do believe convergence is happening, and it's always been happening. But there's also a stream where there is no convergence. By and large, when we talk about convergence, it's not addressing the 95+% of architecture that is still produced in the most basic of ways. So yes, convergence is happening, and it's exciting. But I do believe we need to drum up that excitement and promote that opportunity to younger people also, that who are being force fed all kinds of things in their curriculum, that there is an exciting world of experimentation where design plays a significant role, right? So
I mean, so just to add one more thing, because we'll come back to it later, but we won't talk so much about it now, is I think that there's a lot of kind of presumption and conversation, and there has been for a while, about data kind of, there's infinite data, and data is valuable for all sorts of reasons. I'm trying to avoid the cliche, data is the new oil, but I think one piece of sort of framing of that is all data is gradually becoming more and more spatialized, right? So if you look across the built sector and you start asking, well, what is occupancy and what is parking, right? It's very crudely spatialized, but increasingly it's possible with, just a vast array of sensors and which are just commodified. Everyone has infinite sensors in their pocket. Buildings are kind of getting all sorts of sensors. And, Wi-Fi signals, if you run them through AI signal processing, they become sensors. You can detect a lot more fine-grained data, so you can work out where people are parking and where people are at what time and what are they doing. And that spatialization of the total data set of humanity, I think, is going to be one powerful piece of this, because it will feed into a lot of the design dimensions of it, which we never had before. There's kind of direct signal from people, what they do, in terms of like psychological or kind of somatic biofeedback, but a lot of it is also just incidental, gross behavioral data, which we don't have, which we can start to gather. So in terms of like this convergence or not, right, would you say that there is a natural starting point for people that are seeing this potentiality across multiple technical domains? I mean, maybe the cliche is everyone should start with architecture, but what is it people should know? Should they start by drawing? Should they think about mapping? Should they be data scientists? Like, how does one get good at spatial computing in a general sense and through convergence of spatial technologies?
Well, I mean, yeah, perhaps I'm biased, but yeah, you obviously, I think architecture is one of the key professions and disciplines. Like, if you want to design anything for that hosts like large numbers of people, right? Like, I mean, it's perhaps the only profession that has been dealing with that kind of designing for large number of people simultaneously in a space, and also catering to their specific experience. Like, and so that kind of spatial user experience design. Yes, there are other disciplines like theater and other kind of spatial design disciplines, but architecture by far has the longest history and so, which means that we can learn from architectural history, like pre-computer times, and also like just learn from the built environment, like so much more. If you study architecture, I think, and so I do believe that architecture is one place that you can get started, and it can branch out into many. You can be a recurring architect in many other fields, like so. But yeah, I am biased, but like not so much. I think like there is some considered opinion there that architecture is indeed, it gives you both intellectual tools but also technical tools, and there's also theoretical tools, like people like Patrick have been writing about it, like and so there's a vast repository of theoretical knowledge that also you can bring to bear.
Sorry, just one second, just to kind of like sort of get the subtext of the question. Is it not possible to get into this and to move faster by being good at computation first and then becoming an architect? Because when I teach at architecture school, the truth is that everybody there, I mean, I'll say more about this later because it's kind of important about salaries and jobs, which all the architects will hate me revealing to you. Basically, you'll make a ton more money by just being coder that does architecture. But basically, they're all very, very good computationalists. By Silicon Valley standards, they are very good at the whole tech stack. And it feels like architecture's kind of addition sort of added on to that, but they don't see it that way. They think, oh, well, all this competency is there, but I'm really an architect.
Well, I'm not sure. Yeah, maybe, but like, working with, we've been looking at like the gaming industry for a long time, right? That it's actually a lot more vocational than like the fragment of architecture that most people in this room are from. And I do think like the state of competency and technical and intellectual breadth like is much higher in the profession of architecture. Like then, yes, it's harder for architects like to get as competent in computational things as quickly as like if you're only doing computer science and computer graphics. Like, but I think like it's somewhat easier, I would say, like to start with architecture and learn of the technical things than go the other way around, because you need to spend your younger years like doing inheriting absorbing a lot of non-technical things like that you can bring to bear to design stuff.
Yeah, I'll just follow up on this. I think the question is about spatial. And if you think back, actually, if you remove the whole technical aspect of this for computation, I think it's about a mindset that's about being aware, being conscious of the space you occupy as a human. It's a physical human being moving through space. And I think you can probably look around and find examples of architecture that you might think that had to have been produced through a computer program. And, does it actually resonate? So, what does it mean to walk through a city without the use of a smartphone and become conscious of the materials, the space, the relationships, the dynamics, the light, the sound? I think all these things actually matter. And then if I try and bring that into a computational experience, I want to almost get into something that can recreate that sense. And the closest I've found is through much more immersive computing. So VR has also been on this path to try and eventually get to the point where you can have a sensory experience of space that can somehow match what you'd feel as a human moving through space. And I love to contrast this building next to us, which is the 22 Bishopsgate, which is this huge extruded unitized curtain wall tower. And it's now the tallest building in central London. You see it from everywhere. And you start to wonder, is that really just an expression of just optimized use of BIM software? And you look at something and you compare that with something like Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, and that's the tallest building in Barcelona. And it's very, there's a lot of research into the computational, what's going on in Antoni Gaudi's head. But I think there's a sense of craft and spatial awareness that I think we have to embrace. I think going through architecture school, you can't ignore that we're ultimately still creating space for each other. And the software should be in support of that as well.
Just so I understand, are you saying that that seeing the whole domain of spatial productivity for the humankind, we should see it through a kind of more innate lens before a technical lens? Is that something?
We're spatial by nature. What makes I brought that Apple Vision Pro. What makes this kind of 3D video seem believable is this bifocal presentation of image and then also spatial sound. Right? It's very different than looking at just a rendering or just sound coming in one direction. So I think when I think about spatial computing, I also think about the human experience of spatial computing.
So maybe this is taking it into abstract direction, but I think this is super fascinating. Also, everyone sort of jump in, and because this is super informal, and throw your questions in and criticize and challenge and whatever. Why is it that spatiality is not taught to children at school? Because if it is such a profound sentiment, we're taught music, we're taught cooking as kids, we're taught all sorts of tactility. How is it that spatiality is not a kind of preschool thing? Or maybe it is.
I think we're in it all the time. Maybe if you're playing football in the town square, you're already kind of intrinsically part of the spatial experience.
I mean, I think that's where CDs matter a lot, right? We have a son, and he spends a lot of time in Canada, where the nature is amazing, but cities are super boring, right? And so whereas compare that to London, every day you were exposing yourself to a lot of wisdom of the spatial kind, which is over time, whatever survives has a lot of trial and error that has gone into it, and there's a lot of stimulation, and the buildings do provide that or make that function, right? That they have the urban environment is a key stimulus, for mental growth, let's say, it might not necessarily need to be taught as long as you kind of continue to live in a kind of spatially engaging environment, which is not sterile. And so you get to go to museums, and so I think so all of that which can then be later formalized, like when you're an adult, like I think, like so.
It's also difficult to prototype, honestly, and maybe that's where gaming technology could help. Right, so what do we have as a kid? You have like Legos where you can kind of construct scale models. You know, you can build small mock-ups, right? And with a violin, you can pick it up and play it. It's very hard to build a spatial experience as a child, but maybe with things like, I don't know, like Fortnite or like, you know, in immersive spaces, kids could actually have that experience of crafting space. I mean, it's difficult, I think, the scale of prototyping.
Yeah, so all of you sort of Neanderthals in London who haven't tried an Apple Vision yet, we in California have them raining down from the skies. But if you try an Apple Vision... I mean,
because we have London.
I knew this would happen. Okay, well, I'll keep the competition going through the evening now that it's started. If you try an Apple Vision, when you try an Apple Vision, beloved London, you will see, as Greg is implying, that it has, you know, it is a kind of breakthrough in at least a couple of key technical senses. There's a whole like high quality kind of optically corrected pass-through. When you see your hands, you can see them in pretty much high resolution. You read your phone, and it's sort of pretty well, you know, accurate to position. But then you have like these, you know, AR rendered objects in, you know, very clean spatial fixations. When you wobble your head or walk around or leave a room, they stay there. And those things, I think, really challenge your presumption about what this technology is. And nothing so far that I've seen, and I've tried all the headsets, and Oculus Pro came close, is like that experience of actually truly seeing a high-resolution object with, like, you know, correct ambient lighting ray traced on a very high-resolution render. You genuinely think that in some way it's there. And it's very hard to understand what that means cognitively, but what it also points out is that once we have hijacked or hacked our visual and spatial cognition, the unlock is truly tremendous, right? I think one of the reasons why this is such a profound moment is that if you look at what's happening with AI, is leading us back to actually very conventionalized pathways of information flow and production and consumption, but actual hijacking spatial cognition and using it creatively is, I think, a whole new thing, right? Kind of cognitively and socially, socio-psychologically. Do you think that the sort of unlock of spatial technologies will change? Maybe it's to your point about, you know, what software they were using to design the building down the road. Do you think there will be an unlock in terms of design creativity? The fact that there is so much more simulation capabilities and like using, you know, rectilinear, families which are kind of essentially designed for simple construction. Mm-hmm. Is that paradigm going to fall away, or are we still there for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, I think. Wow. I think we'll see. Like, I think it's also interesting, like where a lot of experimentation happens in, like, also like our architecture school with robotics and manufacturing production. It's always been a bit of a scale problem. You might have robots building small scale things, or you might have concrete being printed, but it hasn't quite scaled fully up. And I think the Apple Vision Pro, this immersive experience, might be similar. I think you might see like product design, like the scale of a car or a piece of clothing, like the fashion industry might pick up on this much faster. But then you've also got great tools in that space too. This is where you have things like freeform sculpting tools for like car bodies, and you know how you design a piece of clothing, and you can really experience that at a scale that's very approachable, I think. And even I can imagine even starting to like sculpt and manipulate and change things at that scale. So I think that might somehow come first. I'm not sure yet if it gets to, can you really construct full architectural spaces, but.
Again, I'm perhaps biased because like I got into like architectural computation because I was mesmerized by like computer graphics, right? And so I do see that there is whatever is attractive in one of the reasons why it is attractive is like a lot of others are contributing to it. Like, so where innovation's happening at a rapid pace will in some way attract people, and that also means a lot of the brighter people will be attracted to something that which where innovation's happening, and that translates also to where money will flow, right? And so yeah.
Not yet.
Yeah.
And to me, just briefly, I mean, it's amazing. We had this fantastic kind of technology explosion, and the discipline absorbed it. We were running at Columbia University AA, and we generated a whole generation of architects invest in this, and we developed it through many studies into smaller buildings, larger buildings, but somehow the movement didn't come through fully. And I think it's quite tragic, because we have generated over 1,000 projects, nearly 100 built, but we are a drop in the ocean. If you look at the cities, and on city scale level, there is just collage. There's nothing else happening. But also, so we have these rare kind of incidents, moments of seeing the future and seeing the potentials of an enormous amount of intelligence coming in. Fitting buildings to each other organically, adapting to each other, mutual adaptation. Resonating with environmental, internal complexities, expressing themselves externally, and also becoming kind of legible, and then simulating things. We're generating layouts, complex layouts, populating whole city districts with variants, modular worlds, which also Shadi was working a lot into. And so we have so much to offer, and the society, the cities, the political process doesn't allow for much of that to come through, also because the discipline got distracted through the meltdown 2008 and distractions of so that's tragedy. But where I see the light now, which is I think absolutely amazing, is while this is still kind of not happening, or small incidents and our buildings becoming larger, we have a kind of big complex of 2 million square meters somewhere in Chengdu, which shows the light, shows the future. It's these incidents that have been growing, and those who were kept within the framework have been maturing, but there's no new fresh blood, very little coming in. But now the metaverse is opening up, so it was also for me the kind of COVID shock, and suddenly realizing that we all have to go online, realizing that in the background, a totally different industry, the gaming industry, had developed tools of, multi-user collective experiences in 3D, VR, you've been using sporadically, and suddenly there's this moment where I think there's a whole huge amount of design and spatial design. I mean, the immersive, real-time, interactive internet will be substituting large parts of the internet and a substantial part of the physical spaces. And that's incredibly exciting. And what I see here is that hermeticism, tectonism, these developments, they will now have much less resistance. There's not political constraints, it's just entrepreneurship. We are now becoming our own developers and entrepreneurs with a project like Metotopia, and we can let it show and rip, and at the right moment AI is coming in, because we're going to design so much spaces. We need these huge productivity gains, not only various algorithmic tools, but also testing tools. And when you go from the physical design into the metaverse design, it's from the designer's perspective, architects, industrial designers, fashion designers, we are framing the social interactions. It is seamless. Just the kind of technology stack is changing, the constraints are changing, but you're designing gatherings like this, spaces for gatherings, exhibitions, socializing, conferencing, collaboration, co-working, or everything which the city hosts now and brings together will be partially the metaverse, and with a lot of hybrid. Nearly every event, I'm surprised this isn't hybrid. We were teaching fully virtual for 2 years. Ever since, everything is hybrid. In the office, every meeting is hybrid. And you have all these technology companies seeing that, getting onto it, serious businesses, and that's amazing. And our architecture will be doing this. And if you look at metaverse architecture, it's the next generation, the kind of computationally fluid, and these are serious, spaces which will be productivity boosting, will be experiencing boosting, and I think that's what I love about it, and that's why I'm fully bought into the metaverse. And it's all the design principles will kind of move on and take that whole internet over to a large extent, because leaving messages or clicking down menu structures and having to know where you want to go and pages and even the hyperlinks. No. You immerse and see what you want to see. Things are co-located. So it's not only individual virtual spaces; it's virtual cities.
So what is just to summarize? What have been the main barriers to progress to date, and what are the accelerants of progress in this direction that people can get engaged with right now?
I mean, there's still some technological barriers, perhaps, but not right now when we don't have the numbers, we don't have the footfall yet. Yeah. So I don't see, it's more kind of an intellectual design and spreading the message.
Yeah.
I think for me, what I've experienced and what we're doing, and all these events we have already at Metatopia, it's compelling. Yeah. And of course, the characters should be more animate. You should be doing interfacing better with your avatar, etc. But I think it's going to happen, and I think it will come like an avalanche, because once the network effects kick in, there's a kind of turning point where you have, it goes into the hockey stick. I know it's coming. Nobody knows it's in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and then we want to prepare for that. And then, of course, that scale, there will be then technological bottlenecks, and there will be incredibly exciting market competition, which eventually will probably crystallize into some kind of new set of standards and some kind of new biggies, which probably at that time will buy us and we exit all our investors nicely. But I think I'm absolutely excited by this prospect, and it's series architecture. This is part of architecture, and it's architects, and that is just to be distinguished from the technologies, the technology translation, because the tools become ever more intuitive for designers as well. And I think that's important. And the kind of what you talking about, children learning, everybody lives in space and learns space and lives in cities, and that competency will get transferred. That competency will make that metaverse kind of usable, and you have to quickly guess and get what's going on.
Or AI,
right? Spatiality, layered scenes, and semiology translates, and then it will take its own life and will develop its own kind of
like, don't you think,
and then they would have to feed back.
Yeah.
Like natural language.
You get another bite of the cherry when you join the stage. So we're just going to park this just now because you get to carry on. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. You guys should go.
Because it's not fair because Martha and Ollie have to frame.
But I do think that there's a good point here, which is again back to the children and maybe a democratizing piece of technology is the natural language input AI system, which is maybe you don't have the skill set to draw, use a tool like Revit or Rhino. You could just start to describe the experience. This is already happening with images.
Wait a second. Martha, do you have a comment on this particular point? Okay. You wait for your slides. So I will. So in terms of a takeoff point, right? Because no one seems to be saying this. I will share this because I want to be the first person who says that I think that what Patrick's describing and the people are looking for in terms of a takeoff of spatial computing will basically be an entertainment event. It will be sports, or it'll be music probably, and it will be essentially a probably mo-capped performer that's fully rendered. With a bunch of maybe some kind of AI agents around them, and that's what the render is used for, both on the cloud side, on the device side, and the agents and the users inside the headset will not be very well rendered. And the premise is that is how people are used to large experiences. When you go to a baseball stadium, you don't really have a very high resolution interaction with your friend. They're eating a hot dog, you want to see the action. And that principle, I know that Shahji and Patrick despise, but I think that'll be the takeoff point. Because I think that's how we kind of balance between users' experience that has experiential momentum and the technology capacity. Anyway, that's my contention. I will say that. No discussion on that. We'll see if it's right or wrong in the next 18 months, 2 years. But so let's sort of start to round up this little piece of it as follows. If you think of some kind of content that has been developed in any spatial computing medium or environment, can you think of ones that are not architecture per se, but are influenced by architecture, or others that aren't but could be some kind of creative output using spatial technology? I mean, you might think about games, for example, that you've been contributing.
So what other discipline can learn.
Well, so it's
can
like what
contribute to
industries are
spatial
doing big things now with spatial computing that either already uses architecture as a driving force or could or should use architecture as a driving force?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like a bidirectional thing with video games. Like we've been very much interested in the participatory aspect of games and the user experience aspect of games that, traditional CAD platforms do not represent the user, let alone represent a user choice. And so fundamentally that architecture is very useful. That systems level architecture is something very useful for us to inherit from the game design world, and start thinking about the human eye perspective, which is very, very native to video games and hardly native to CAD platforms. Even in Rhino or Maya, there is not a user mode where you can walk around in the buildings that you're designing. So I think that's one thing that we can immediately benefit from, and all the experiential aspects, and also some of the games have a lot of game theoretic aspects about reaching consensus, which is also something that it's perhaps a nuance, but it's something very useful for us as architects to inherit. And vice versa, most of the games treat architecture as boxes with textures on it, right? And you normally don't even go in because architecture is there just to be blown up, and so and they don't get any polygon budget, they don't get any textural budget, and usually they're the background, and that's where game design can genuinely inherit a lot of principles of designing spaces for user experience and user interaction. So when we did the PUBG Mobile collaboration, what was fascinating for us was that it was opposite of what we normally do. But they did have some rules and heuristics, which was to say, because it's a first-person shooter, you need to have optical and acoustic opacity, as opposed to when we design spaces, we look for enhancing optical and acoustic transparency. And so it's kind of inverse of that, but it was two sides of the same coin. And so we've actually thought about it a whole lot more than just the heuristic rules that they have used, right? This is an extremely popular game, and to us it was very revealing to know that it's designed through these kind of trial and error heuristics, and there's not actually a parametric system that calculates how much opacity there is, or how. So I think game design could, in that sense, benefit a lot from parametric tooling that architecture has developed over the last 2 decades, and also just translating architectural requirements into tools. That's something that I think we both have the theory and the parametric tools. Yeah.
John.
Wait. No, sorry. Let me finish this section, and then we can carry on. Greg.
I'm coming back to I think that scale. Then I'll just maybe reiterate the point about maybe that. I'm actually looking forward to see what does Gucci come out with for Apple Vision Pro, because usually in the presentation of clothing, fashion, and cars, the character is always in some context, and it's always trying to express an emotional experience of space or place, right? So the emotional connection you could have with a piece of clothing, I think, is a bunch different than what you have today, with just scrolling through a photo captured in a studio. So I think what we're going to see is a fundamental human spatial capture experience of content. And again, I think Gucci's coming out with something soon, but I haven't seen it yet. I'm looking forward to trying that. I mean, that becomes an inspiration for maybe architects.
Is it bringing in money yet, these other things for you?
For me,
are
Bentley Systems?
non-architects driving spatial computing in a new way in terms of revenue for Bentley?
I think that will, definitely selling an experience of a piece of real estate beyond just a web viewer. I think absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, Sharjay. Thank you, Greg, for the initial conversation.
Thank you.
So if you just So you need to go up top and get mic'd up.
And change up.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll have a 2 or 3 minute break while these guys get mic'd up.
Who's next?
There's so many good stuff in there.
Well, next time we should have like less people. I should not be speaking. We should get only Marius and
You're one
Adam to
of,
speak.
I thought you were.
So, does my microphone work? Not my microphone. Yeah. So. Testing, 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 testing. Can you hear me? Testing, 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 testing.
So yeah, I was working with a company called Facet Homes. I used to be at Big for a while. I was working with John with Treasury.
What is the problem?
Big site.
How do I even
I was working.
I don't know how to unmute. Testing, 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 testing. Can you hear me? I can't hear anything. Testing, testing, okay. Come on. Just put it on. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, so we'll start again now. Thank you so much. Yeah, okay, great. So more people will probably roll back in, but we'll just start again. Thank you so much. Well, thank you for... making the microphones work. Yeah, great. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you for the pre-discussion, Greg and Sharjay. Now for the fourth in our mini-series, which Patrick launched back last year with us to essentially set up the conversation, what is the role of architecture, not just the role of architecture in spatial computing tools, but what is the role of architecture in spatial computing as a whole set of potentialities. Very grateful to have Martha here from Foster & Partners, Ollie, formerly at Big, now at Facet or Facet. I mean, I don't know. And Architecture Tech, Architect Network, and then Patrick Azar. I will introduce, allow everyone to introduce themselves properly, but just so to acknowledge that they're here, and thank you for coming to this Treasury session. What I'll do is I'll just tell you what Treasury is, all right, and then I'll tell you why it exists, and then I'll tell you roughly how it works by doing a demo. And so I'll try and run through this so you get a sense of what we're doing. Our invitation to you is to join in, to join in at this conversation in the coming months and years, and tell us obviously what we're doing wrong, be involved, making it better, and creating and selling and making stuff. So I'll give you the basics. This is very new. We've been doing it for 18 months or so, so you'll see some kind of things that need a lot of work, but you get the general idea. Essentially, when I, in the pandemic period was thanks to Ken's money at Epic, putting out this podcast on spatial technology, I started asking people about the metaverse, which I hadn't found very compelling so far. And the question I asked a guy called Matt Ball, who is one of the kind of, I would say, credible gurus of the metaverse conversation. He's a technical thinker, he's a strategic thinker. He's not just a booster of products. I asked him when I introduced him to Epic Games and as part of that process, where are the assets coming from for a growth of metaverse stuff? And he was like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, AAA games and movies, when they put assets in their big projects, take years to do it. If you want people to populate these spaces within months, let alone days, and for them to be credible experiences aesthetically, psychosocially, spatially, technically, you're going to have to get these things from somewhere. Essentially, you need a licensing system. And he said, I would invest in that. I was like, what do you mean? I just asked you a question. And he said, I would invest in a premium asset licensing pipeline. And so my next move, a few days later, was to check in with Sharjay and say, are you licensing your back catalogs, i.e. work you have designed for developers or content on your servers or sketches and models to metaverse and spatial computing applications? And he said, we're starting to. We're working with PUBG, we're working with Epic Games, some of it's confidential, the stuff is coming in. He described the project with PUBG. It was a complete shit show of imperfect licensing. The wrong files being sent out, the wrong document, the wrong contracts being set up. 9 months of work for 3 months of actual output. And I thought, well, that sounds like a good idea. We know these things work. Getty Images is a premium licensing system that is very distinct from a stock photo library. And so I said, well, would you want to be involved in building such a thing for the architecture and creative industries at large. He said, I think so, let me get back to you within 45 minutes. Patrick said, yes, quick, let's do it. And then within 3 months, we'd had a venture funding round at an incredibly absurd valuation with Google's AI fund and other investors involved. And that was partly because it was 22 and everyone was insane for what they thought the metaverse was going to be, and crypto and every assets and whatnot. But I think people had a sense that it was a good team that was forming. Anyway, so basically what happened was I was pitching the project in my underpants in Sweden in 21 and got funding at the beginning of 22. And by the middle of 22, the pandemic was over, and I'd put some trousers on and started, doing work in San Francisco, and we'd started to have some product. And so, but by, fall of 22 to now, we've been testing and building and bringing in some initial additional collaborators, and this is what you'll roughly see. The essential point is that, the worlds and experiences that are being created with spatial computing, whether they are a complete metaverse or unique spatial experiences, need good content, right? IP, creativity, technically good content, properly licensed content, and that in our sort of branding language elevates creators and enables builders of spatial experiences. So what we have built basically is a registry system for assets, so you can ingest a spatial scale. What we mean by spatial scale, 3D asset, is something that is around you as an observer, rather than digital object which you are around, roughly speaking. Architecture is poorly defined in digital, in terms of product design terms. What is the actual scale of it? It essentially means what's around you. We have a registry system primarily for spatial assets, discovery system for spatial assets, and it's very similar to Getty Images. If you use Getty Images as a contributor, there's an input system which you put your stuff in, set some licensing terms, it gets reviewed, and it gets put out onto their website. And we've built, we think, a better version of those two things as a kind of MVP in 18 months than they've built in 10 or 15 years. And we do a bunch of content stuff and some other things that you'll see. The content stuff is this kind of thing. Conversations that try to kind of ask questions, bring people together, kind of expose our weaknesses, and have you tell us how to do it better. Registry has a few functions. If you do not want to license your stuff, you should at least archive and fingerprint it so that no one else can steal it. That's very important. We've gone to a lot of architecture offices and asked them, do you want to license your stuff? And they say, maybe, but not now. Foster & Partners would be a good example. We say, do you think you should prevent yourself from being stolen? Probably. Would you like to commission things? Would you like to get commissions for new spatial things? Yes, probably. So if you don't want to syndicate, which is the sort of formal language for setting up a licensing opportunity in every possible channel, you probably should archive and fingerprint your stuff for reasons that we'll discuss. Discovery is basically like a 3D website, basically. It's a WebGL-driven previewing system where you can look at stuff, commission stuff, and choose stuff for deployment, which is basically how you get things actually into your project and pay for the proper license and so forth. And we create content. So we have events. We've had about 20 events so far. This is the fourth in this mini-series. We've been mostly in San Francisco, some in London, some happening in New York, some happening in LA on real estate, film themes. We publish some content. We have a newsletter, and we publish some white papers, all of which you're invited to contribute to and obviously improve. So the why is very simple. And I think, if what you came for was a lot of answers and sort of whiz-bang, like presumption about how this is going to play out, I think one of the problems with spatial computing and metaverse is that you're often being sold a product, right? What you're being told by Meta and even by Epic Games is, here is a vision, oh, you're all invited, right? But I think correctly, the way to think about it is, here is a set of creative and spatial technologies and social and business and cultural and ethical impact opportunities. What do you want to do with them? And so this conversation, I think, and certainly Treasury, is based on questions, trying to fill out gaps. The venture investors in Treasury hate one thing about it, which is that we love asking questions. I think the extent to which I get on very well with Shaji and Nils and Patrick and the team is we love asking questions and considering things from first principles. And while I have pressure to make money, and I would like to make money, and I'm sure that Patrick would like me to make money, and on behalf of the company in which they have some shares, the real question is, the real project, I think, is asking questions. And hopefully that makes it feel like more of an industry or a creative industries initiative, because while it is venture-backed to a certain extent, I'm happy for it to fail if we ask the right questions. So I think these are the right questions right now. And so they're presented as kind of provocative points, but really what we're doing here is asking questions about it. And there's really two things that sort of, in the sort of social or creative conversation drive treasury, and there's one other thing that drives treasury, which I'll share, which we've already talked about. These two are the provocative points. Creators must be paid, and architecture matters everywhere. And what I mean by those things isn't necessarily the cliche stuff, right? Everyone says architects should get paid more and creative industry should get paid more. That's obviously true, right? Everyone wants that to happen. But being paid more is not the critical question at this moment in time. It's being paid at all, right? But because what's about to happen is that even if people don't know what they're doing as consumers of content, they will end up destroying the professional potentiality of a lot of creators, right? OpenAI was busted the other day saying, well, we don't mind if creative industries just die. They backtracked that in the last days, but that's what they're permanently doing, pretending that they're not actually extracting creative content and getting them paid for it while paying nothing to creators. And so creators must be paid is a unique question at this point in time. Creators must be paid at all, not just more. But also, if creators are going to be paid, their potential is to make this whole thing better, not just to be a marginal piece of a technical phenomenon. Creators really should lead the show, and they need to be paid to lead the show. So that's the first provocation. The second point is this: architecture matters everywhere, but that's not just in the built world, and it isn't just about aesthetics and fashion. Right? Spatial computing is a spatial premise on every possible level of experience that involves visual cognition. And if architects matter in the built world, they matter in the digital world. And so I think that point that architecture matters everywhere hasn't really worked as an argument in the built world yet. And I think now we have to make it work in the digital world, because otherwise what's going to happen is a lot worse. If you go to Horizon Worlds, you ask yourself why it's a horrible experience, the easiest, quickest answer is to say the environment is fucking hideous. It is incredibly trivial and antithetical to any good sense of visual experience or spatial experience. And that is just pre-architectural. It's just crass in every way. And that is the danger. Mark Zuckerberg launched one version of Meta Horizon on the basis of cartoonish images of the Eiffel Tower. That shouldn't be allowed. And somebody has to say it's not good enough. It's not just let's include architects in spatial experiences. Let's ask what is the foundational role of architecture. And so the premise is, or the question, the provocation which leads to questions is, spatial computing can be led by architects and by architecture. And the last thing is this, really, and so my provocation here is basically, this is not architecture, this is not gaming, which is the easy ways into it. It's all these technologies that I mentioned that are converging into this infrastructural layer. And the convergence piece, obviously including AI, but the fact that these become commodity that converge in a kind of merged sense, in the same way that AWS is a convergence of lots of different kinds of compute, new competencies in the workforce are going to emerge very quickly. And I think what you'll see if architecture in particular doesn't understand spatial computing is happening, is going to get to a situation where there will be architects of record in every city and teams of spatial creators with varying competencies that do projects for developers and clients and just bypass the industry, and they just get that stuff stamped. We haven't seen that before. Not really. It does happen, but it's about to happen, I think. And I think, again, if spatial computing is happening, there's a business issue here. One thing I will say repeatedly, privately, and once or twice publicly, the lowest salary in San Francisco, a pathetically low salary, is $150,000. A starting architect salary after qualification is $15,000. And I'm telling you that all the computational architects I have met in every school and every office easily could get the computational jobs in San Francisco at $150,000. And you tell me that won't change things. If what happens is that spatial computation leads to backsetting and evolution of the actual architecture industry, earn 10 times more for half of the qualification. I think that's the point. If you want this world to be shaped by architects, you have to accept that it's happening now. So those are the provocations, some quick demos, and then we'll get on to the conversation. I know Patrick is furious that I didn't let him continue earlier. Okay, so, I mean, basically, what I'll show you is very quickly the sort of supply-side product called the registry, right? And so these things are actually functioning in MVP state right now, and we very much invite you to sign up for them and help us test them. If you're a practicing architect, you're a filmmaker, you're a creator, obviously you need to be quite good, but, we'll work it out together. So the basic idea is that this is, in principle, an archiving system for content, right? Not all of this content is licensable or available for licensing. It's kind of in demo state right now, but you get the general idea. Architects and creatives can archive their work for private use or for showing clients. It doesn't need to be visible in any way. And basically, the system can fingerprint it. And let me find my mouse to come back to life and make it available for use in various ways. So, archiving system, and basically the way it works, like as a baseline, is an archiving system, and the basic way it works is like this. Essentially, just take an asset. So let's say do this, and so basically writing in a name and a description. All you need to do, right, if you want something to be visible or in the archive in the Treasury Registry, is add an image and some kind of 3D model. If you want to do even less than that, if what you want to do is to see if the market might be interested in this without licensing it, just take an image, preferably a cutout image, and so-called pre-list. We'll show you that in a second. But otherwise, just proceed, right, to upload your model, and the model needs to be basically sufficiently high fidelity that we can run what we call a morphological signature scan on it, so we can capture unique identity from the 3D shape. Because basically, this is in a very kind of preliminary state, so we have to put all the pieces together for this to actually work properly. But basically, the premise is once you put something into the Treasury Registry, you wrap it in what's called a morphological signature. Now, this is led by Sharjah and the Zaha team currently. There's other partners that are joining this, the fingerprinting project. Essentially, the way this works right now is we'll take a Fourier decomposition of the volumetric form, the topological form of the object, and write that as a signature in a database against your identity as a creator. And while the asset is archived, you don't have to do anything with it, but you can basically have the fingerprint out for monitoring and metaverse platforms that allow their asset use to be monitored. Obviously, you can't scan things, technically speaking, if platforms don't open up, but at least there is a fingerprint in principle available. If what you wanted to do was actually get this thing out to licensing, this is where this goes. This is a bit better than the Getty images system. You can wrap it in a custom license, define exactly how you want the asset to be used, who it should be used by, and that's unique. Add a bunch of asset packaging, determine that you ownership, that you own the thing, so Treasury is not liable. You have to say you own it in order to make it licensable, and then the asset is available in what we call the discovery engine. So that's the registry system. Discovery engine is basically, as I say, a kind of 3D asset viewing thing. And so basically what we start with is a spatial mood board. And the idea here is that anyone creating stuff for spatial gaming, architecture, films, apps and whatnot can look in the spatial mood board and choose themes, colors, locations, styles, designs and so forth, and just ideate and play around and kind of create, mood boards and collections and so forth. And so basically what it does is kind of like highlights interesting content in various ways. So let's see, what should we explore here? So this is the mood board where you can kind of click through to things. There's also a search engine, which is a bit more hardcore, has a more of a kind of rich semantic premise behind it. So if what we wanted to look for was something that was metaverse oriented, we could pick up this. So there's an architect that used to work at Zaha called Mariana Caballera, who has kind of emphasized architecture for metaverse use cases. And this is one of her projects, right? I'm not sure the exact construction state of this, but it's becoming available for licensing. And so what we have here is basically, this is essentially a WebGL previewing system. So the model you see here is not sufficient fidelity to use in a game engine or an app or whatever, but it's sufficient fidelity for you to preview it and then request deployment and look at it in a more sophisticated tool like Maya or Unreal. And here is the information about the licensing. If the asset isn't ready for licensing yet, you can request a listing or request deployment. There's different kind of stages of things there. And so let's see here. So there's other stuff here which is coming in. So we have stuff from so this is let's try this instead. So this is a reality capture company that does a bunch of stuff with Netflix. So they basically have, reality capture projects that are, basically a few $100,000 per go. And they don't have any other licensing system to use, right? They will never use Unreal Engine Marketplace, even when it becomes Fab.com, the supposedly to be released marketplace. So this is a GLB for web use of an extremely high resolution, hundreds of thousands of photos and billions of point cloud elements, which you can license if you have enough money for a kind of high-end use case. So that's a medieval village. That was probably licensed to a movie or some documentary or something, and they retained the rights, and they're now licensing it through Treasury. And so there's some of Zaha stuff in here. We're still working at exactly what Zaha Hadid is happy to license out or able to license out. This is an ongoing conversation. But we've started to license content through that image needs to reload through the discovery engine. And basically what you'll see here again are these kind of WebGL previews of assets that can be obtained in principle in any form and resolution, poly count that you want, because we have the relationship with the creator. So this is something that they created as part of an experimental metaverse type project. And we have tons of interest in this because people are wanting to do, as Patrick says, hybrid events, hybrid experiences. So when you have assets that are fully designed for both worlds, right, you can imagine constructing this for a collaboration environment and having a version of it with maybe some registration marks to use with Apple Vision so people can sit on seats but in a room with real people. That is technically now viable, and the only office currently accelerating into that space is Zaha. I think other offices are technically ready for it, but Zaha's grabbing the opportunity because they've set themselves up for this, and I'm happy about that. Also, we have a bunch of art stuff, right? And so I'm going to kind of demo two things here for you. So basically what we have is content that has, I say, not been put in as a 3D model yet. It's pre-listed, but people really want people to think how it could be presented spatially. And so, we have some artists that are joining, and Mika Marple from, I think, LA has expressed interest in joining. And so we've got some pre-list content, which basically hasn't been presented as 3D content yet. So it's not been scanned, it's not been modeled, but you get the idea of how that kind of content could contribute to spatial computing experiences. We know from some of from our demand-side partners that they want things that drive music videos and so forth, and they don't want architecture, they want funky art shit, basically. And so that's the content there. We have a bunch of relationships with an unnamed film company where basically, they have agreed in principle to join the platform, and we are in the process of negotiating with their legal department exactly what comes in and how it gets used. And for now, we're putting up spatial mock-ups so you get a sense of the kinds of things that come in. A lot of content will be presented in that way because it isn't 3D. We want it to be 3D. So you get the idea. Finally, what you see here is a search system. It's pretty straightforward, but it has a good taxonomy attached, and a commissioning form. We don't have all the world's content. We have a tiny microscopic fraction of it, and we'd like to expand that. But you can commission anything. We've spent a fair amount of time building simple and highly sophisticated commissioning forms which don't exist anywhere. You don't get that in TurboSquid or Sketchfab or anything else. So if you want content and we don't have it, ask us for it. And being venture-backed, we will put free money on finding the shit you want. So that's the discovery engine, mood board, viewbox, searching, and commissioning. And we have some other things I'll show basically, but you can look at the website later to get a sense of it, sign up and you get access to this, and it works right now. We're adding stuff to it all the time. That's the general idea. So I've shown you the discovery engine, I've shown you the viewbox, the registry. Just one last thing, we do a ton of events, right? So please help us make more of these and come to more of these, because it turns out that if this is question driven and for the industry community rather than for specific organizations, we can broaden it and bring in filmmakers and artists and engineers and other people working in spatial disciplines. So that's the presentation of Treasury. If you go to treasury.space/launch, you can see a bunch of other stuff, like who else is launching with us right now, and other bits and pieces. So you get the idea. So thank you for that. And we've just started this. we're bringing in more venture money, but really it's a creative industries project. It's by creators for creators. And so please use the fact that we have venture money to criticize and castigate me and the team and everyone involved. Make it a project that actually drives value for the creative industries and not just venture capitalists. So here we go. I mean, basically, I've talked enough, right? So I'll ask Patrick and Ollie and well, so thank you. This is the launch where people can actually use it properly. We've kind of fumbled and bumbled and kind of presented it out, but now we have it sufficiently stable that people can actually look at it and give us criticism that was useful to us. I mean, just to say,
I have a bit of criticism.
But you always do, Patrick. Yeah, I mean, there's no news there. I mean, but just to be clear, I mean, so it is an industry-wide initiative, and we have to be very careful to present it as such, so we don't scare the horses and make sure that other officers are not interested in participating. But it is also true that Sharjah in particular and Zaha in general has been, foundational to making this happen. Partly just through their willingness to see such a thing exist, partly through their advanced use technologies that drive this kind of evolution of spatial computing beyond architecture, and also because they are just some of the big thinkers that I happen to have met in architecture so far, and that made it tremendously good fun, despite the fact that it's been a vast amount of very complicated work. Okay, so, I mean, the conversation is this, basically, right? It is something happening right now that will mean that architecture gets deployed or must be deployed or can be deployed differently from being mainly focused on construction. Will the economics change? Does the discipline change? What are the practices? Does the education change? Who does what and what are the opportunities? And so, there's been some conversation of this sort from the previous chit chat, but now I think we can start. So Patrick and Ollie and Martha are going to each do a presentation, and then we'll have a roundtable conversation towards the end of which you can all jump in and challenge or contribute or whatever you want to do. So Patrick is going to start, and here is his show. So there we go.
Oh, this way I can't see. Great. Well, I love tragedy. It's fantastic. I just want to start with the criticism. When I saw that medieval village, I saw, wow. Perhaps one has to kind of branch off two versions. One which is movie sets and fantasy and backdrops, and the other one is assets for the metaverse, which is the kind of metaverse we're into, which is, taking over a lot of all organizations on the internet, every event. Social media will be 3D spatialized real-time media, but also everything which goes on in the city. You were asking earlier, what is going to be the content in the metaverse? You said mainly concerts and big entertainment. Well, no, it's everything, literally conferencing, exhibitions, trade fairs, corporate internal organizational communication. Schools, we're just working right now at the AA for, universities, that starts to happen. Of course, retail and fashion shows and everything. So also, as well as later, night clubbing and socializing, there are all these spaces already to some extent, but they will come together in cities. So that's my idea. It's this huge opportunity for architects, because we are going to design all of this stuff to the extent that it isn't necessarily movie sets for fantasy movies. Okay, sorry. I don't know why I've jumped across. So, real-time communication. This interface expansion is very important in itself. The interface being kind of typing in something or clicking on something which is preconceived. A few things on a page, a drop-down menu. You have you're immersed in a space where you see many things in front, a crowded scene, layered. As you move your head, you're seeing more things. You move, new things fall into place, and they connect in meaningful ways because they're placed there in the metaverse city, I think, through where those offers and offerings wanted to be placed. So that's a huge thing, I think. And by the way, when the internet started, there was thinking of a spatialized internet. And also you find everything archived and exhibited in the metaverse later, as well as kind of working together on things. And this kind of, therefore, this browsing navigation, this intuitive exploration where you don't have to type in something or go where you heard you want to visit a certain organization's website. You throw into certain districts, you move from one to the other, and you discover people, conversations, but also things which connect up, what you might have searched originally, and that is huge. and it's incredibly interactive rich because when you arrive somewhere, you can do things. You can talk to people, you can look at 3D models, you can post things, you can leave traces. I mean, I think this is going to be big. And I think when COVID hit, we realized a lot of this had started to happen. All the events companies went virtual. So they have all these virtual kind of exhibitions. And recently, if we get into these kind of liveliness of being represented in the metaverse, because I think it's a direct continuity with our real lives, that we're moving from one to the other or we're hybridizing. The technology keeps evolving and we haven't yet caught up with the technology. And so we've done some studies at the AA where you have meetings, hybrid meetings, where you all sit in the same space, a continuous space, physical and virtual, and the sharing of audience. So not you at home only, joining everybody else who's at home in some kind of artificial condition on a grid of faces, but where you have one group linking up in another group, etc. And then infusing workspaces with these interface and windows into virtual worlds where all this kind of layered over each other. So it will feed back into physical space, and you can also have AR overlays and information graphics in the space, etc. And so the idea is of these kind of cave-like immersive virtual spaces embedded in physical spaces, but then the whole facade is also kind of LED and a screen. So screens everywhere and immersiveness everywhere and panoramic immersiveness, etc. So we get these kind of studies of these would be virtual space embedded into the physical spaces in these kind of cave-like conditions. And you can bring in assets of all sides. I mean, car design and architectural design collaboration. So this is the next thing, these kind of collaborative things where you be working with the digital and let's say immerse yourself more closely with that. And anyway, so these kind of conditions. So we've developed at the office, we're working mostly Unreal Engine, but we also have the Unity kind of team. So this is a digital twin office of our Beijing office. You can see out in the city of Beijing. You can spawn screens wherever you like. You can drop models in. You can jump into the model. You can sketch on the model, leave notes, and you could be all multi-user and have design review meetings there. In that, I think that works quite very nice. We also, when we had a big exhibition in Beijing, we've done a number of exhibitions, Shanghai and elsewhere already, in Hong Kong, during COVID, so everything went virtual, fully virtual experience, immersive experience. And this one, we doubled it up inside. We have a big physical space, so this is the virtual version, 80 models. You can see them, all the photos, all the displays. In the virtual condition. This would also, you could access also while you were physically, any of the models you kind of go to and jump into and explore further details. So this is kind of the way an exhibition would be. And it would be multi-user. You can talk, you bring your clients around, etc., etc., etc. So, and then, I mean, as I said, we met, there's a lot of companies, this metaverse, they were an events company. They were hosting events and showrooms, etc. So they went selling private jets in the metaverse, and that worked really well. They picked up some of our designs one-to-one and it made it their metaverse. We said, it's okay, great, let's work together. You have at least taste, and we do the next iteration for you, okay? So we're not so kind of copy, in architecture doesn't even work, the kind of copy editing. So anyway, so we then went with them, we used it as a platform for Liberland, which is also building a virtual community ahead of a physical community in these kind of city conditions. And we did an urbanism, and we developed various kind of assets. You can roam around. Of course, inside, outside is a bit different in the metaverse, but you still want to have degrees of privacy or publicness. And we generate the incubator building at many events, conferences with 25 lecturers. And meeting new people, meeting a potential investor also in the whole thing, and giving lectures and having different booths. And it's really lively because this conference, instead of screen like Zoom, you can come into advance, you meet people, you have different settings where different things happening, you can roam from one to the other, etc., etc. So it's a much better experience than a Zoom experience. And Zoom, of course, is trying to go spatial as well at this point, and Microsoft anyway. So it was also, the whole kind of more urban interface. At that time, crypto was big, so we have NFT Plaza, we have Crypto Plaza and DeFi Plaza, etc., etc. And then we shifted into kind of this metaverse, Metotopia, where we realized we wanted to fill this with tenants and make leases and make lots of contacts. All of our contacts were other architects, designers, car designers, maybe schools of architecture. And so it became clear that this will be the ecosystem which we're addressing is kind of like a design district where all schools of architecture, magazines, lots of firms will come in. We did virtual Venice Biennale, and it's not a very underdeveloped kind of urbanism. We started with one incubator building, which we could have transferred over from Lieberland, adapted a little bit, bigger atrium, etc. And you can walk in. There's a main auditorium with screens and banners and various events. We have NFTism gallery. Kenny Schachter imported. We've developed from before, so he's also shifting assets in. Virtual Venice, with great architects were collected, like Archi Union from China, Philipp Yuan, or MAD, Kurt Himmelblau. Theos Baropoulos, and so on and so forth. We had great kind of people in the OMA. We had great names, and of course all these names are no longer invited into architectural Venice Biennale. Venice Biennale is just a kind of Vogue kind of nonsense, basically. It's nothing to do with architecture. So we have Su Fujimoto, etc., Lava, In Studio, all these guys who were frustrated with the Biennale, brought out great projects, and you can explore them, look at them, jump into them, and they were also populated outside. So as an exhibition with close proximity, talking, meeting people, videos running, etc. And in the background, they were also sitting outside. And then we had other events like fashion shows. We had our own interiors gallery in there. So it's lovely. We have weekly events there, and you can also go into these big art exhibition models. So it's really great experiences. You can talk, meet. We launched a new piano design we've done, and this is our interiors gallery, all the furniture. And you can also jump into a particular full interior. I'm not having that image here with all the details. You can jump into this wormhole, into this fantastic fashion design as a head of CAFA, Beijing, Central Academy of Fine Arts, fashion, and it's a great kind of fashionist. So we have a professor speaking from CAFA, the author themselves, discussing, then going up to looking at the event, watching some videos, making connections, networking, and getting a great experience. And these things render beautifully and effectively. And then we have the flying cars company, Dubai Air Show, parallel with these kind of launch. You can jump on the thing and fly around and look at this, learn about it, etc., etc., etc. Then we want to scale up. What do we do? A whole city like this, because this is going to be city life, design district, cultural districts, art district. And then we also, in the Eddie study, this kind of more of the urban, metaverse urbanism condition where these things will be cities, virtual cities, and they connect up. And I think this is just the final image where you, not quite yet final, where you get also translate into a bit more, let's say, the lightness and gravityless and dynamism of the metaverse can become inform architecture. We then put a lot of our buildings into some kind of Zardid city, which is, also the way we present ourselves and build a kind of urban environment. Because what we have, the tragedy is here, there is no urban design on the planet for the last 50 years. And the discipline is totally failing with designing any urbanism. It's just individual icons trashed together like a garbage spill. So anyway, we have all of this geometry in there, and you can roam around and meet people and show people. And I mean, this is not fully rendered. And finally, I want to show what this kind of collaboration with Epic, with Shadja is working in this team, and Henry is here as well. I think this is a video. Let me see. Oh no, now coming. So basically, where you have this kind of library of modules and things which Treasury has, and you can draw them down and drop them and collaboratively build something, participatory design, a design game in a nice context which is rendered in full detail, and then you can kind of collaboratively generate these things, look at them, render them, and I think that's one way. I think we get a lot more kind of user participation and user-generated content into this new world. So because if we build this metaverse, which will be literally thousands and thousands of spaces and iterating much faster, we can't do it. The few professional companies will not be able to do it. So there are going to be these techniques of procedural design, of gaming, of user-generated content, but will come in. So that's the pitch, and I'm very excited about it.
Thank you, Patrick.
Ollie.
Yeah, so I don't have a metaverse presentation, but I can talk to you about, I guess, my thoughts on the metaverse with what I'm doing. Most of you guys will maybe know me from Big or from Architect Network. If you don't, come to our pub events. We host them every quarter, and we do this kind of thing, but in the pub, so you've already got a pint in hand. But maybe I'll talk about like what my view on the metaverse from my perspective of working now at Facet Homes. So at Facet, we design, manufacture, and build sustainable homes in the UK, and we do that by digitizing as much of the design to build process as we can. So we design in a virtual environment exactly like you guys do, Rhino, Revit, all of this kind of stuff. But we're able to translate that into the physical through G-code and sending our machinery on site, which is our CNC machine in a container, and we build components out of plywood and we build a house out of that. And so I think what interests me is maybe how can we expand what we do, the full design to build process through virtual environments. And I think it was really interesting what Patrick just showed there. I think one of the first things I find really interesting is like the gamification of the user's input in the design process. And I think housing is particularly interesting with that because, of course, you want an architect or someone to design at least the parameters of your home, so you don't design some bonkers house that it doesn't work or can't be built. But each person has a different requirement, right, of their own particular home or their own, whether that's a unit in an apartment block. So I think there's something quite interesting about that side of things. How can we use like the metaverse to incorporate users into the design process? And then as we transition from like design into construction, when we're actually making things, we start to get into the world of industrial metaverses. I saw Corbus over there. It's like the omniverse world of like how can we connect machinery digitally, like physically and digitally, so we can track these things, we can track the construction side, and then also how can we expand that beyond the construction process into like the living side, whether we can control the home digitally from one side to the other, or even get into the kind of sister of the metaverse, which is blockchain and cryptocurrencies. Like how can you change the way you could potentially buy, sell your home through blockchain, or even like crowdfund through blockchain in this kind of three-dimensional world of the metaverse. So that's particularly my interest in this world of Facet Homes, where we are the architect, we are the manufacturer, and we're the contractor. So it's a really interesting process having come from Big, because we're solving our own problems. That we've designed a thing, we are the ones that are going to build it, and that creates like a very direct feedback loop. More broadly, I'm kind of interested in the era of who is going to be designing this metaverse or these virtual environments. I think you guys were discussing this before. Like, yes, I do think architects should be designing this space, but architects are kind of busy trying to build stuff in the real world, and I think a lot of architects are not really taking it as seriously as they could. Meanwhile, there's this world of 12-year-old kids making these Roblox spaces, and they are actually the creators of this space right now. And also this rise of these kind of new AI artists or architects or influencers or whatever you want to call them, right? And I feel like there is maybe a bit of a race as well with AI, because, yes, we're in the world of diffusion and image architecture right now, but, we're very quickly moving from pixels to voxels, and that world is moving into 3D very quickly. I know, it's already here, and I think this year it's really going to maybe explode. I know, we got real-time generation, so as you walk around, I think Midjourney has talked a few times about real-time worlds. So, are we going to be the ones to design it? We're kind of messing around, busy trying to build stuff and make a living building stuff. generating 3D content is going to be really easy and really quick. And so I think that's maybe an interesting talking point as well for later, is like the rush of AI as, we're kind of getting into the metaverse, slowly getting into the metaverse as architects.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Thank you.
So I don't really have a presentation about the metaverse either. So thank you, Oli. I would first like to thank you, John, for having me here. I love talking about the future. I love talking about how technology is going to shape the future. I'm very happy to work at Foster & Partners. I think everybody knows Patrick and the work that they do. So this is a little bit of the work that we do. Maybe you recognize it. I'm leading the applied R&D group at Foster & Partners. It's a small group. We're usually 1% of the company. Some of them are here. This is my side of the room, apparently. And we are a very small group, but we have a lot of different knowledge, as you see from the side, and we are tackling different areas of expertise. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about experience and interaction. I know that everybody loves talking about spatial computing. Apple spent the better time of 20 years trying to convince us that they're not doing computing, but now suddenly they're doing spatial computing, which is interesting to me. Because it's not about spatial computing per se, right? It's about extending our experiences, and that's the extended reality term. And this is something that we have been known to do for quite a few years at Foster & Partners. Francis, who's sitting just there, started working with UCL in 2001, looking into military-grade headsets that at the time cost $100K per person, but they allowed for real-time collaboration in design space. And since then, we've been going through a lot of different applications, from kind of interactive tables to caves to iPads. We were even in the Kickstarter for the Oculus back in the day. And it's interesting because the problem with these technologies is that the hardware never really follows up with the software. But because we as a company at least were thinking about the possibility of this technology so many years ago today, we are able to use augmented visual reality and the idea of a metaverse, not just as a visualization tool, but as a design collaboration tool, and at a fraction of a time and a fraction of the cost. So these are some of the applications that we have been developing directly into VR to allow us to do real-time design and optimization and analytics. As the person you see on the screen was a partner, he was basically designing this application that works a little bit like Minecraft in steroids, being able to create and analyze solutions as he was creating them. And also we're trying to do a little bit of good to the world with the support of Epic Games, who gave us a mega grant with City University and UCL to create an application called Varied that effectively allow you in virtual reality to be able to understand how people with visual impairments understand the world, and effectively help you design based on these impairments because, well, you guess it, massing differences and color differences play a huge role if you cannot see very well. And it may mean that the person may see a staircase as a ramp if you don't design it appropriately. Again, this is all very interesting, and it placed us in a very excellent position during COVID to be able to do reviews like that, where the physical environment and the digital content were merging. We were doing this review in the house of one of our colleagues, and different people wearing headsets in their own houses were able to partake in this sort of collaboration using models, PowerPoints, images, and videos. And that all accumulated in the creation of one of our software called Glaucon. Glaucon is the software that was kind of running in the front while hardware started following us. And it is the sort of software that would allow us to do a lot of interesting applications in real time. So we are talking about spatial computing. We've been doing spatial computing for 40 years. CAD software is spatial computing, right? But what we're talking about is extending our experiences and our physical realities. Like in this case, being able to bring all the clients on the grounds and being able to see how that building would look at the time. So this is, again, in COVID, you can tell from the masks, and you can see that everything happens with backpacks. We kind of graduated to iPads, and after that, we graduated to a lot of different headsets, like we were developing for Vision Pro even before it was deployed or being able to buy. We did that in the Apple labs. And that meant that when it came out, we now have a few of them at the office, and we can do things like that, like moving around and having this very, very intimate experience as we design and understand how the spaces feel. That means that through these technologies, we can go from collaborative XR reviews to analytical data overlays, virtual buildings on site, XR services for entire cities, in this case a 40-kilometer city, as well as digital mock-ups. And in different scales. So this is a digital mock-up that we're seeing in real time, or a tower, or even the entirety of New York, and be able to walk through that. And it's interesting because John is creating a fantastic application which is around digital asset management. And digital asset management is something that all of you are going to be doing time and time again. We are now deploying Glaucon as something that everybody in the office can download, and they can do their own authoring and creation of assets that can be digested directly in the headsets that they have. That means that we're no longer expecting somebody to go through an expert to create an asset and put it into, let's say, Vision Pro. But through direct run, in this case, they can download the app, they can author their own asset, upload it on our kind of local cloud, and be able to visualize it in real time. And this is interesting, again, because that means that all the assets that we create can be fed directly into our own version of the metaverse. So I was lying, there is a little bit of metaverse there. For many years, we have been approached and asked to contribute to other people's metaverses. And we thought that is an excellent idea, because assets are of incredible value. And most of the assets that you're currently creating, the data that you have in your office, is going to be the actual value that your office has in 20 years' time. But we also had a problem because you never know what these metaverses are going to be used for, how they're going to be, and you don't really know what the visual quality is. And as Foster & Partners, we always go for highest visual quality. What you see here is not a movie, it's a game. It's a game built on games engines, which we have been using for many, many years. And it allows us to have our own office as our playground, where somebody can visit the office online, they can walk around, they can jump into a building, they can jump into an experience, like in this case, the Mars project, that I'm very particularly not fond of, but anyway. And then go into a materials library, be able to create trays of materials, or even into our hub, and potentially at some point even buy stuff. So a lot of incredible possibilities through digital assets. There are education and facilitation possibilities, and there's these digital assets as a commercial value sort of possibilities. And all of this can play out through a metaverse, but also through the data that you yourself have, and that something like the Treasury is going to be able to ingest very quickly for you. And through these digital assets, you start having digital people. And again, you start tailoring these experiences around this. And finally, we're happy to say that the hardware evolves, and as it has evolved enough, the potential of these technologies finally makes sense to us. And as I always do, I will point my partner in crime, Francis H., who used to run this group before me, and I'm going to say a little anecdote, if my computer manages to work. So that little anecdote goes like this. In 2015, we went together in SIGGRAPH, as we did every year, and we were asked to participate in this VR experience, which effectively tried to reinvent the walk, replicating Philippe Petit's 1974 tightrope walk across the World Trade Center, which unfortunately is not there, as you know now. And we had headsets and the wind in our ears, and wind was blowing on us. And so I'm Greek, and I don't give a shit, really, so I just kind of walked throughout and walked through the rope and back. And Francis wore the headset, and he was ready to walk the rope. And if you know Francis, he's a pretty kind of straightforward, logical guy, right? And he could not do it. He took the headset off, and he told me, liking the experiences, like I can't do it. It just feels too real for me. I cannot do it. And this coming from him means a lot, because it means that these experiences can become part of our everyday life in very significant ways. Because we're not anymore talking about just a metaverse. We're talking about the potential to transform the way we experience the environment around us. A few years back, you had Pokemon Go, and everybody was running around mad about these little kind of creatures. And now you have Peridot, which is an even fancier version of that. Or even companies like Styly that creating tailor-made experiences that can be overlaid in cities in a very much Blade Runner style. What happens is rather than having your phone or your iPad, you have a lens that effectively customizes your experience. We have the Ray-Ban glasses that currently are available. We have glasses like the ones from Brilliant Labs. And more importantly, we have AI. We have AI agents that through different hardware, like the one that Rabbit is currently offering, are going to be collecting information from everything that you do. They're going to be talking to all the software that are using this API-first approach to tie each other together in the background. And they're going to inform and overlay a new reality on top of the reality that you're seeing. And what would this mean for our special experiences? How far away a Snow Crash or Neuromancer future is? I would say not too far. Thank you very much.
The conversation started, perhaps starting with you, Martha. Well, because
you're afraid that if you start with Patrick, that's going to be it. I
know what will happen.
Okay.
Basically, you were talking about different technology evolution, and then the relevance of spatial assets. And my question to you is, as you've seen these technologies evolve, how fast is this another false dawn, right? Is this another kind of like cycle of technology that isn't going to break through, or is it something that's ready for prime time right now?
Technology always has a way of failing us, and all of you who try to do a presentation with a PowerPoint knows that. So I would say that we all get super excited about new things that come along, and we think that this is it, this is the moment, this is our moment. And it's never quite that, but it's a stepping stone to something new and exciting. So I feel, are we there yet? I wouldn't say the hardware is there yet, but I would say the software, the ideas, the notion of the value that digital assets have is there. And I would say this need to have full customization of the experiences that we have, which is a need that we had always been having. And if you see now with the rise of social media, people are not anymore talking about traveling. They're talking about experiences that are tailored to them. A lot of these things are going to make more and more sense. So where we want to be in that road depends on how much we're investing on the ideas that are not necessarily ready now, but will be certainly going on in at least 5 to 10 years' time. So I'm never kind of doing something for what is going to happen tomorrow. I'm doing things, and my team who's sitting there, hi guys, are doing things in relation to what is going to come within that time frame. And I think that's what we should be looking forward to.
Do you think there's a danger that we're going to get stuck in like hardware doldrums again? Meta's going to let us down again?
It's ready for prime time, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's just it's the kind of network effects have to kick in. There has to be. We don't have it happening yet, but it's ready. But if the pioneers will be lonely, it's not yet has the value. So that's why it's very important to have kind of a lot of investments coming in, a lot of money. It will all be redeemed. I'm very convinced because the technology is sufficient to make great experiences already.
Let me ask you this question.
But the social experience, so you need you need these network effects. That's what I believe.
Let me ask you this question, Ollie, in a kind of backhanded way, right? So, when I have worked on last meter with real estate companies, the amount that they say they want to adopt technology versus the extent to which they do is probably the biggest offset and kind of absurdity in any industry literally in any industry. I mean, taking real estate as a whole, including construction, but just operations and development and so forth. Do you think that real estate is one of the unlocks that can move faster, right? Because in terms of all these other experiences, architects are using it and games are using it and young professionals are using it, but real estate just doesn't do anything, right? Their idea of breakthrough is a smart lock, right? I mean, so are you going to lead change in across legacy real estate, not just like pioneering developers, but like how is that going to play out? How will that lead to the unlock?
I mean, when you say like real estate, I think of like realtors in a or real estate agents, right? And actually, I feel like architecture firms, we got excited about VR and got headsets and all this kind of stuff, and very quickly kind of like, all right, that's cool, let's get the iPad out kind of thing. But actually, in the real estate world, everyone's got their apartments scanned with Matterport and have this kind of like experiential things, and it's really driven by the money. And I think like sometimes architects, we maybe need to put that kind of business hat on and connect where the money is going to be. That's where the technology is going to get put towards and adopted. For example, you guys were talking about the tower next to us. Is it shaped because it was great to make in Revit, and they didn't really adopt new tools and technologies? Probably not. The truth is it's shaped like that because of the money behind it. They're trying to maximize the amount of space that they have in this like super expensive land values. So I think we'll see where the money goes. That's really where the technology will filter into it, I think.
I think if you make that statement, and I'm shocked with you, John, you're not really following what's happening with startups. The majority of startups for the past 5 years in our industry have been in PropTech. Real estate has been seeing the potential of a lot of these technologies far before we have been, and they're trying to use it to monetize them in a very powerful way. Now, are all the startups great? No. But there are some really pretty good ones that certainly surpass what we do in architecture. So I would strongly disagree with your statement that the real estate is lagging back. If anybody's lagging back, it's architects, and that's a standard thing.
So, I mean, let's be more specific. And both Patrick and Martha, would you say that in your firm's approach to standard clients, are you driving more, as it were, spatial adoption versus construction and kind of conventional physical world sale, or are they asking for it, or where is the meeting point in terms of accelerating the digital in parallel with the physical with real world real estate developers? Who's leading? Is it the architecture firms or the developers, or is it a conversation?
It's a generic question that has 1,000 answers if you have 1,000 clients, right? I think if you have the know-how and the capability, you're always trying to lead some of these things. There are clients who come with a lot of know-how themselves, and they want these things more than they want other things. It's a balance, right? I think every big client has now consultants who are consulting them exactly on the value of their digital assets, the value of extended reality experiences, the value of digital twins, and all these come from them. And they also come from us because we have been doing these things. So somewhere there's a happy middle. Are the clients who don't know about these things and they need to be educated? I would say absolutely. Are the clients that they have expectations that far surpass what is available or possible right now? Absolutely.
I mean, well, for me the topic today is the metaverse and transferring some of the activities of the physical world into the virtual world, but then also interfacing back. And so we do have quite a few clients where we can show them the VR, we can tell them about multi-user VR experience as a sales pitch, but that's relatively trivial. What I find exciting that some of these clients want to use, and we have now one signing up to this idea, for instance, of developing the virtual spaces as a community building, buying into it, meeting, trading, participatory design, but then also in some of the instances the digital twin advancing as a sales, but it will be start to be used, not only looked at. So one could have an exhibition space in one of our towers, which you can start have virtual exhibitions. A conference space, we have virtual conferences, and that can continue. We had a real estate client, for instance, or even from Thailand, who was talking about wanting to have a kind of a high net worth network of residents who might be in different cities, and they have a clubhouse, and the clubhouse starts virtual, but the virtual version will continue because you want to have different locations coming together. So we're designing a virtual clubhouse, which also will be a built clubhouse, but stays a kind of virtual complement, substitute, and we will get used to this kind of hybrid life, virtual life, and that architects can deliver that. And I find it exciting. And we had also, we usually bring it to the clients. That developer brought it to us. But I think that's for me fascinating. That there is, but then there will be entrepreneurs who will be purely virtual. So there will be virtual real estate, like you can see in Decentraland, and virtual developers, who will not only the platform and final end users, but there will be this layer of developers developing properties, buying strategic virtual lands, and promoting a kind of synergy cluster, and then bringing that to end users. So I think that category of developer will also emerge in the metaverse when it happens.
Wouldn't you agree, Patrick, that I think a lot of these people are investing a lot of money for a physical asset that they can showcase? They come to you because you have the Zaha Hadid name, and they will have a headquarter that bears your brand. And I think because that is the main focus, I find myself that a lot of the digital thing can be implemented much easier from things like digital twins that effectively allow them to have an extended connection through operations with their buildings that can then spill into all the things that you're saying. I don't feel that the clients come very much inclined to saying, I would like to have all these digital experiences, but they can see them effectively start building up and bubbling up through this thing. Again, there is a sense of physicality of what we do as a profession, which is an interesting thing to counteract with this idea of a fully digital space. That's why, although virtual reality has been around for so long, it never really picked up. And now that headsets that allow you for augmented reality to be much more real are picking up, because that's where the future is going to be. The future is going to be with us co-living in physical and digital spaces. And so our assets cannot necessarily just be part of a virtual environment, but the beauty of something like what you're discussing, I think, is to be able to see a virtual Zaha building in the city of London that people can go and say, okay, this empty plot could be this, and that be something that then Big have or Grimshaw have or any other kind of firm. And I think that sort of value becomes something that everybody can go behind.
And exactly, so I think we will. I mean, Facebook came to us and we did a whole study for them. I cut it out because it was only meant to be 10 minutes. So, but for instance, because this hybrid working and not fully going back to work is happening everywhere in our firm as well. So we have all these. Half of our meetings and interactions are virtual, and they also have this problem. So they wanted to have a space where people coming in once a week at least, all the home workers, and we designed it though also that it's a virtual world which they can go and meet virtually, and then they come into the physical, which is similar, but the physical is full of screens with windows into the virtual. So this is a kind of fascinating world which it speaks to exactly what you're saying, and that when that came, this was a dialogue we had with Facebook. Didn't happen, but that's I find exciting, because I truly believe that there's an enormous efficiency also in cutting out on travel, having reviews at the AA with everybody coming in from LA and everywhere else, but then also wanting to be a group there physically. And at the moment it's a bit kind of dodgy and not so nice, these hybrid. And I've seen a lot of panel discussions where I'm sitting here, there would be a TV screen, and in person a TV screen, and I'm doing, I do a lot of lectures, joining panels from abroad, and so the technology isn't quite there yet. It's the old technology. It's not immersive. It's not, and the audience comes in as a grid of faces. So I foresee this fusion being very, very exciting, but also then spending time but from coming in, not with a group, joining another group, but by yourself, I still think there's also a big part of the metaverse. So, and most organizations we talk, of course, they have buildings already, and most organizations which have websites, they have also buildings, and these things will be designed together. So that's why we want to be the architect who's designing both the virtual spaces and the physical spaces, because they need to connect, they need to be recognizable, and maybe they also need to be seamlessly integrated somehow. That's the thing, is a great market for us. Of course, the bigger market will be purely virtual, because there will be so many organizations who will dispense with the expense of a physical space.
I mean, so I'm just going to push the conversation in the direction of what kinds of experiences we're composing and so forth. I'm going to cover two questions or two themes in advance, which are quite slightly boring, but like basically regulation and governance and power and so forth. But before that, I just want to say how delightful it is in London to hear and use the word dodgy, because no one uses that word in California. Thank you, Patrick. As a Brit, I think it's one of my favourite words. So, when we talk about, we started to talk about, I mean, just sort of to edge into the question of like planning cities and sort of owning real estate, and it raises two questions that are kind of important in a way. I think in a way they're more important to sort of fearmongers who are exogenous to the overall project of using spatial technology, who love fearmongering. But it is kind of interesting. Is there any useful role? What is the useful role of conventional spatial planning type regulation, or any extension of that in these digital environments? That's the first question. The second question is, what about money and ownership, right? Because we talk about digital real estate, okay, then the digital real estate has something that comes before that, which is digital land grab, right, and digital land governance. And so those are two questions that I think it's good to address in some way, even if provisionally. Is there a role for regulation? If so, what is the status of who owns the land? How does that become something that isn't inherently hyper-concentrated out of the gates? Because if there's one thing that is correct in the current left-right disagreement, it's that there is too much concentration of land ownership, leading to a limit of housing and spatial development potentiality in society. So governance and ownership. Who wants to grab the thorny cactus?
It's a good thing, no? I think fear keeps you a little bit on the straight and narrow. So I don't necessarily fear. I don't think that fearing a little bit about things is a bad thing. Now, ownership is a great kind of construction of the human species, and capitalism has overtaken us. So there you have it, and therefore there are always going to be people who are going to find ways by which they can make money, whether that's with virtual kind of NFTs or virtual land or what have you. Should there be a regulation? I mean, it should be a regulation the same way that there should be regulations of who's owning land to the moon, right? That's an unexplored territory. It's going to come at some point, and when it does, how do you want to play it? And what is the importance of that land? Is it the fictional importance? Because for me, if we think about virtual spaces, I find great importance in virtual spaces that can also be created for the greater good. What does it mean if some person who's very poor in Africa can be part of an MIT school directly through a virtual school, and not only just them, but anybody in the world can be participating in a completely virtual school? And what would that mean if the cost is like 1/10 of the cost it would take you to go there? What would it mean for somebody who's tetraplegic, who cannot walk, to be able to travel in spaces, in physical spaces, in a way that they cannot do physically? And at that point, that sort of notion of that space has value. But I think we need to stop looking into the regulations exist because we're bad as a species, right? If we have the opportunity to do bad, we're going to do it bad. So that's why regulations exist, and therefore having no faith in our species whatsoever. Should regulations exist? Absolutely. But we need to see the bigger picture, I would say. Like Patrick is laughing. I'm not quite sure if you're agreeing or disagreeing, but it's absolutely fine.
Ollie, what's your view here?
I mean, I think that there could be some interesting rules that connect maybe the virtual world to the physical world, as Patrick mentioned. Like if you have a twin or overlay of London, maybe the roads and certain of these geographical locations are mirrored and untouched, and then the plots in which all the buildings sit on, that's kind of a free-for-all. So then you get this world where you were talking about a hybrid situation where you're in a virtual environment, but there's also quite an interesting situation where you've got an augmented environment. We've all got the technology right now in our pockets to go outside and view the buildings around us with some kind of digital overlay. Like, what happens if someone creates like a real world Roblox, twin on top of London, and you can go out and some 12-year-old kid buys that building and can, build a dinosaur on top of it. I think that becomes quite interesting in terms of like, maybe, I don't know if it's governance, but rules between the physical world and the virtual world, because I think that's what makes it interesting, and that's also what makes this piece of digital land valuable, is because you've just bought that piece of land that's above the Houses of Parliament, and you can put your message there in this virtual environment. So there's something interesting in that.
Well, I mean, we have Metrotopia, and obviously as the founders and owners of the platform, we will, and we're meant to be a city, we will have to think about, and we have thought about it, previously with Liberland also, about how we would sell or lease land, how we would organize urban patterns, and because we also new degrees of freedom, whether the location of the plot could shift, you can squeeze new things in between, and also what kind of degree of certainty or expectation management you give to people who buy a certain plot and what's coming around, so master planning. Or when it came, what was fascinating at the time when we started, crypto was much more seen, like for instance through Decentraland and elsewhere, as these kind of governance layers where these platforms had plans of decentralizing out, of letting all the investors or land buyers become part. They have some kind of forms of shareholder democracy, etc. And we also looked at that in self-organization. So what I find fascinating, that in this world of metaverse, we can rethink that anew, and we're not kind of locked up in kind of pretty kind of frozen up political structures in the real physical world. But again, there's a lot of, you need to give some kind of structure, because people want to know what they're buying. If they're buying into vision, will that be free for all, and I will end up be surrounded by things which I wasn't expecting to have. And we had this idea of multiple regimes in different parts of the city, the center more kind of curated and planned with predictability, the outskirts a free for all, and then people know to things that they have to expect the unexpected or not. But the main reason of this regulation would be to maximize value, to give, to not be over restrictive, to prevent things, to not allow for value destruction through new things devaluing existing things. A bit like the great estates, where the great estates were curating a kind of collective value proposition with some kind of private planning, with various degrees and regimes, with various leasing cycles. And they started actually in London, they started with kind of 15 years leases, and then it ended up in kind of 75 and 100 years leases. So we're thinking about all these things, not that we've worked them out fully, when we're thinking about a kind of virtual city. But there will be many different ones. So there will be many different virtual cities, and to some extent the regulatory regimes will be part of the deal. Mm-hmm. And whether this is attractive or not attractive, some people will learn from each other, and there will be some convergence to a new standard, what you expect. And I find it fascinating. So we study a lot what the different metaverses are doing, in particular Decentraland, how it manages its asset and secondary market to keep churning this. And of course then you have speculation and all of that.
Interesting, because all the research that is happening around value in virtual spaces shows that the prices and the value is fluctuating exactly the same way that happens in physical spaces, which for me is like it's an insane paradox, right? Because theoretically these are infinite spaces that you can create, and at the end of the day,
network effects and location.
well, it is. I understand all the economics behind how this is done.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that if you start thinking about it as a bigger picture thing, what is the value that we're trying to get? The value is effectively something that defines these spaces. How do you say, okay, I'm having a plot, and next to that is a virtual building, let's say from Zaha Hadid. Why in that virtual world that raises the value? Am I trying to sell something? I'm trying to be seen. Is this a social experiment? I don't think we're still very clear about these ideas, and that's why we adhere to the rules that we already know that are the rules of a physical space. But this is not a physical space.
No, it's the same
And if we
logic.
start-
I know exactly what the
if we
logic is.
start-
It's co-location synergies, and if you virtually place the
Yes, but you need to
Sotheby
let me
gallery, the plot
finish.
next to it will be valuable. I mean, it's the same logic. That's why the replication, not because
Well,
it's
it's not a fight, it's
No,
not a debate
it's the
even. I'm
same
just saying
logic.
that it is the same.
physical space is also infinite, right?
No, it's
so,
not
but
infinite.
but the spot in the center of London isn't infinite.
No, it's not infinite. How is it infinite?
Well, it's equally infinite.
Well, if we
Because you have
have
deserts
time
to go to.
travel, it's infinite.
These titans of architecture, let me share some theory that I'm not sure they're particularly aware of, because I'll tell you how this will be different from what is currently being discussed on stage. So there's a piece of policy reform. There's always been in the background of left-right politics for around about 100, 200 years. It's called Georgism, and essentially it goes like this. So it says that in the theory of economics, there's a thing called economic rent, right, which is not a conventional factor of production that's not conventionally subject to market forces. There is a labor market, and there's a capital market, and there's a technology market, but there isn't really a market for what rentable assets are. If you have them, you extract value from them essentially infinitely. And so rent capture is one of the challenges in economics. And Georgism says the value that people get from rentable assets is somewhat legitimate and should be redistributed, and it is the way to bridge between left and right redistribution, because rent is free added value, whereas profit is what you get out of making your productive factors of production work harder, and that is competitive activity. So here's the point. The way rent works is that if you have an office building and the city decides to put an opera house next to it, your office building is going to go up in value, but you didn't do anything. You didn't redesign it, you didn't add any value. The nature of economic rent as it applies to real estate is people get location, and luckily, very often, the value goes up. And that's why prices fluctuate. The developers don't do anything competitively to make the value go up. And Georgism is the theory of how do you redistribute that additional unearned, uncompetitive value. Here's where it gets very interesting in the digital space, and Patrick's going to be very fascinated by this, because if somebody licenses from Zaha or from Foster a very prestigious building for their metaverse, and they pay millions of dollars for it, as they should, because it's a fantastic piece of design, and they anchor their metaverse around it, and suddenly everyone else wants plots of land around it, and those plots of land are more valuable because Zaha's plonked its building there. Whose value is that value? The additional value of those plots of land around the Zaha or the Foster or the big, just so everyone's happy, I'm just going to, the big project, right? Well, so Patrick, when you discover that you're losing millions of dollars, and that what you can do is to say, actually, I'm just going to discontinue the rights of that digital asset, like that, you're going to get that money back. And that is new. That is new about value, and it's not possible in the physical world. That's why rent is such a tricky issue. It's because it does persist in the physical owner of the asset that's benefited from the spatial co-location of value that boosts their value without any profit-making activity. But in digital spaces, they can get the value back if you license it correctly, which is why treasury is useful. Because you want value to go up, Patrick. I know you love the idea of land value prices, but you love money, free money even more. And licensing this correctly means that you...
But nobody will take a license that you can withdraw on a minute's notice.
If you say you want profit share from rentable increases of land around,
of course.
Well, then some innovation will happen in regulation and finance.
You said that
But the
it's like
premise is the
special
same logic as physical and virtual is the same logic. Same logic applies.
Is the special collocation that you mentioned as a rule of the microeconomic environment making the plots around that opera more important? What is the point of special collocation if I teleport? Special collocation is significant in relation to a special reality where we need to walk from A to B.
Yeah.
But when you can kind of fly from A to B like in an instant, special collocation has no bearing whatsoever.
So I knew this piece of the conversation would go off the rails. This is why I said I was going to bracket it.
Before we go on, I think imagine a kind of virtual city or even a virtual building where if you emphasize teleporting, you're back to drop-down menus, and you kill the whole spatial navigation.
Okay.
So that doesn't work.
Thank you. So
It is so co-location.
I think this particular conversation. Wait. Okay, so
if you have a metaverse of teleport, it's not a metaverse. It's
Patrick, thank you.
it's back to
Yeah, great. So, I think this conversation, right, is a specific conversation, which is what is the difference or commonality between digital space and virtual space. We'll have a specific conversation around that. You're very welcome to join in and take over that one too. But for now, let's have some inputs from the audience as we start to tail off. There is the Aish contingent up there. No, that's Ken. Sorry. I thought it was the Aish family. There's a whole Aish block. Ken Pym himself, currently of Treasury, formerly of Epic Games. Hello, Ken.
One of the things I just wanted to say about this whole virtual real estate is I think the premise is it's malleable.
Yes.
In that you're
Wait, sorry, Patrick, you're not allowed to respond to this because we're going to go on straight after this conversation.
There's a consensual experience which it's not have to be that way. It could be I experience that city totally different than the person next to me.
Yeah. When you say consensual, do you mean shared?
Yeah, you're
A non-consensual experience. Okay, yeah.
Virtual property.
Yeah.
We all have to see it the same
Interesting.
way.
Yeah. So I know that Patrick is desperate to respond to
If
this.
you don't do that, then again you don't have a metaverse. Then you have lots of individuals.
Okay, so thank you. So this is why I think it's a specific conversation, right? What is the commonality? Because in the physical world, you cannot choose to have anything other than a congruent experience intersubjectively. In the digital world, you can. Sorry, you had a question there. The man next to Ken, I think. Oh, no, that man there on the Aish block.
So I'm next to you.
Robert.
I'm actually
Robert
interested in
still.
the real world as well. Yeah, Robert. You just think of me as Robert.
Which is his name.
My question is, and this is pertinent to what you said, how are architects going to win over Taylor Swift? Because everybody's going to want to be in Taylor Swift-skinned city, not the Zaha Hadid. And I'd rather be in the Zaha or Foster's-skinned city, but
We designed the
most people are
stadium
going to be in
for
Taylor
Taylor
Swift
Swift.
city.
Yeah.
You don't need to. I mean, we have a much bigger market.
I mean, so my answer to that, because we use this in all of our narrative, right? Is that actually when Taylor Swift decides.
Who she was, but apparently it's a thing.
Yeah. Wait. Sorry. So on this point, because we use the example a lot, right? We use Taylor Swift as an example. Like the Eras tour is the most valuable tour in history. But if you look back, right, in the history of modern rock music, what actually made musicians significantly profitable as the CD era kicked in was the invention of modern touring. Right, and the invention of modern touring was in large part based on the invention of modern staging. Right, so if you go back to U2, which kind of pioneered it, they created these incredibly sophisticated staging concepts that they could break down, put back in another stadium, and it was part of the whole narrative and brand and experience. And no one can do that except architects, particularly as it becomes hybridized with digital, and it's guaranteed. Guaranteed. And this is the thing I want to say. Taylor Swift is coming to one of these offices within the next couple of years to say, do it, make me an experience, not for whatever it was, 10 million people, make me an experience for 500 million people, so I can drop ticket price to $5, have it on a mobile phone, have it on a laptop, have it on a Vision Pro, have it on Oculus, whatever it may be, right?
We're making this about architecture, and then, we are putting so much self-import in what we do, which is the beginning of the end, right? And Taylor Swift, I would say, we should not I'm not a fan. I didn't even know who she was as well. But I think reading about the economic repercussions of something like that, and if you start thinking about digital gaming, I don't know if you know about it, but there's an entire fad where people are actually going to stadia to participate in virtual digital gaming, right? And this is a thing that makes a lot of money. And I think, again, we need to start thinking at the thing that we never think because we have so much surplus in our mind that we have of what is our value. What is our value as a profession? What's our value as a profession in 10 years' time when AI commoditize what we do? What is our value as a profession when our cities need to be kind of directly and constantly shaped and reordered in an augmented reality way to tailor the experience of somebody who's like on Facebook and wants to see like a pretty picture on top of a building? Where do we want to be when that game is being played? Because if we continue the discussions the way we're continuing the discussions right now, we're not going to be 100 kilometers close to that value, and we're going to be obsolete. So I think we need to start a little bit breaking the mold of what is our value and how we want to reshape that value long term.
Yes.
I think on the back of what she said is quite interesting. When you think about architects, I'm not an architect, but
Lucky you.
I know, but I have to deal with architects all the time. And one pattern I do notice is very egocentric, right? All the buildings here are fruits of design from multidisciplinary tools. In the virtual world, you don't have to deal with gravity. You don't have to deal with energy. You don't have to deal with limited amount of real estate, right? Yet, the world we're seeing digitally here is shaped by architects who are used to designing for a space that is real. But what about gaming? No Man's Sky. Who knows No Man's Sky here? I'm not a gamer, but I know of No Man's Sky. It's a procedurally generated game that has 18 quintillion or 15 quintillion planets, and every player gets to experience the same universe. And it keeps on expanding. And there is value in that. But no one went in there with a capitalistic, architectural, real estate developer mindset and said, I'm going to monetize that one planet and only allow people who pay me a certain amount of money to visit my planet.
What is your name?
Catherine.
Catherine, and you're based in London?
I'm based in London.
Okay, because we're doing another one of these in December. I mean, because you might be good on stage, because it's good to have. I think it'd be good to have like a proper counterpoint, because I'm trying to get this bit of the conversation going, but maybe I've failed. Sorry, carry on.
Why do you want us to fight with each other? That's what you're looking for.
My point is, this drive to generate revenue is killing creativity that we've seen killed already with YouTube and Dailymotion. The quality of videos that were created and put on those platforms over a decade ago, when YouTube had no adverts, they had people in their houses creating music and creating films and actually being.
So let me ask you this question, Catherine. So you're Catherine, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So let me ask you this question. Give me one conclusion as to how we can prevent, as it were, the capitalistic takeover of digital environments. Is it too late?
I don't think it's too late.
Yeah.
I think people need to stop prioritizing generating revenue and actually ask ourselves, what do people want? Instead of having all these algorithms that are there to predict people's behavior so they can guess what they want to spend money on, maybe people want to stop spending money on buying things, buying places. What about, but it goes back to the first point that all of you debated about, spatial experience. How do you actually emulate a real spatial experience in a virtual world by transcending the limitations we have?
So I promise you I'll come back to that specific point and we'll end on that, because that's a very interesting one. Yes?
Well, thank you very much for the talk, first of all. And,
Darling, you have to be a bit louder than that.
I love discussing how...
Wait, sorry, what is your name?
Rabia.
Yeah.
Okay. So, one of the things that struck me while we were talking about designing these digital cities and metaverse, so in reality, one of the reasons we want to create this digital platform is because in reality, it's not because we lack land to build on Earth, it's because we have political restraints. Let's say we've got, I come from more of a Russian background, and I can freely say it. In Russia, there is a huge block of land that's just simply unbuilt. Antarctica is unbuilt. There are lots of places, but due to political situations in the government, we can't really build cities. Historically, one of the greatest cities to be built, like within a few years, maybe 20 years, was St. Petersburg. It was by Peter the Great. He came to London, loved the architecture, brought the architects, brought the workers. They built it within, it was just like an empty plot of land, and they built it. Now, in the past, the power alone was in a monarch or the leader of the government. But right now, as we are talking about the future and digital innovations, we can also talk about how the future politics will be changed. Now, we are living in a capitalist world, and I don't think it will be changing. And to be honest, I'm a capitalist. To be honest, I have seen the communism and what it has done to my country. So, I think the good question here is, and there are some people who have billions of dollars, and in the past it was only kings. Now these are the entrepreneurs, the architects, Zuckerberg, the Elon Musk or whatever. And if you take digital city in a metaverse, and you say, I want to build it. Now, if you could use it as a selling tool, let's say you've got $3 billion from here, and maybe I can contribute $5 here, but in a sense, rather than us as architects looking for clients or building for clients, we are building for ourselves, and then clients are, let's say, funding us, and then they are saying, okay, I'm going to give $5, I'm going to give $10 billion, and I've got rights to the city, and then you build another city that is, as great as St. Petersburg.
So you're saying that digital creativity enables more innovation, then more people can create more, and real estate developers can choose what to construct from that somehow.
I say, like, what I'm trying to say is, as we are embracing the way technology is created, it's just, I feel like we as architects should not solely hide, or use it as a coping mechanism for the fact that there aren't actually real political situations where we can build real cities. Because the city that Patrick was showing, it was like, wow, what if that was built and people can choose to live there or not? I mean, in a city like London or Paris, this is a city that has had history.
Yeah.
But then you go to Russia, or even I'm from Azerbaijan. Baku is the home of Zaha's building, and if you go out of Baku, there are literally empty plots of land, just empty, and we haven't had an architecture history. I can't say we have had a cultural history there. It has been destroyed. It's just empty plots of land. And if you build a city, you also build a new way of living.
Okay.
So people who are used to maybe living in this kind of boxes as a child. So if a child grows up in a village,
so lots of experiential expansion, basically, experiential options.
It would be very interesting.
Yeah.
And then we can get the doctors and medics,
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much.
Create actually data on neuroaesthetics and empirical data on how we perceive this.
So if you'll allow me, we'll take 10 more minutes after 7, and then we're going to have drinks on the 26th floor. I hope you'll join for that, because apparently it's a spectacular view, and we spent an enormous amount of money in it. So please come and drink our alcohol. There's a lady there, but actually, thankfully, Robert H has put his hand up because he was going to essentially insist that he makes a point. Everyone knows who he is. Feel free to contribute.
Thank you very much. Can I just turn it back to a sort of more technical thing, although the philosophical one is really interesting. So we're talking about spatial computing, and I'm really just a little bit surprised that the word topology hasn't cropped up, because that's really a good way to describe space. So, if I designed a building with a particular configuration of rooms, and somebody else did one with the same configuration, wouldn't know, but it looks like a configuration. So, for example, if I uploaded a donut to the system, and Francis uploaded a coffee mug, and I require licensing for my donut, would he be paying me a license for the coffee mug?
So I'll answer that directly. Thank you very much. So that's a fantastic question. It's the kind of question I love. The reason why topology isn't the list of things I listed on the spatial computing is happening slide is partly because I personally believe that the theory of architecture is quite weak when it comes to actually the science of space. All right. And so if you ask people how they define their creativity in terms of topology, I would say 95% of even professional, competent, technically trained architects will not give you a topologically sophisticated answer. So I'd say that is a piece which isn't directly converging, because I don't think it's evolving very fast. Architecture schools are very bad at theory. That's the piece I most miss when I've been teaching architecture schools. But you're the person that's been pioneering it. What we are doing in this piece is, and it's not resolved, right, because it's still very early days, is thinking through the definitive nature of space, at least for the purposes of fingerprinting, right? So if what we're doing is taking for these objects, I did actually mention the word topology when I was describing the morphological signature. Basically, it's a Fourier decomposition of the topology of the object. So we're trying to describe it in topological terms, and as much as geometric terms. And so insofar as we're trying to define in the fingerprinting piece of the project, which I don't think is a kind of technical approach to spatial computing that is actually shared in great commonality, but Sharjah and Zaha are very fascinated about it. Insofar as we're trying to do that, please come along to our seminars and tell us what to do. because that is an interesting question, right? I mean, even if you don't take, some of the stuff we've been talking about in the background, the sort of genetic approach to design identity, like how one thing becomes another thing, and you try and retain identity or rights across those iterations, so that the phenotype has some rights that are rooted in the genotype, as it were, of design sort of surface forms. I don't think the science of designating identity, even if you don't include the genetic piece, just in terms of static objects, I don't think the science of morphological identity is very well evolved. But maybe it is.
This is a really interesting
Apologies,
point
isn't doing it.
because technology can help process re-engineering.
Right.
In a way,
Right.
not that I'm in favour of BIM,
Yes.
but BIM in fact facilitated a process re-engineering.
Yes.
And your system make people more aware
Yes.
that they are actually designing.
Right. Exactly. Thank you, Robert. You're hired. The lawyers will be in touch.
By the way, I don't believe the topology is the answer at all. I think there will have to be some kind of AI kind of classification process. Anyway, Kerti.
So we'll have one last question, and then we'll finish the panel, and I will finish up some stuff, and then you all drink our free alcohol, please.
So we have been talking a lot about architecture. So I would like to bring our attention to what we can learn from, say, the internet or the gaming industry. So just to make my point, like there's a genre of games called serious games. One that comes to mind is this protein folding game called Folded. Once that was released, like ordinary people just by playing it could solve a very complex computational problem, which is protein folding, and that was a really interesting phenomenon. So I would like to ask, do you think through these spatial sort of new digital technologies, what sort of architectural problems can we try to solve by bringing in this crowdsourcing of maybe human intellect? And another thing, you might be familiar with the whole Reddit pixel wall, where it was not curated, but people would just come together and communicate and create this whole, just by manipulating one pixel, and brings the whole idea of, we were talking about how pixels are now voxels, and how we can sort of co-create or orchestrate some sort of...
So the two questions there are basically crowdsourcing knowledge and then collaborative co-creation, basically. I think that's the essence of the 2 points.
Relevance in our industry and how we
Yes.
leverage that.
So, Patrick, co-creation and collaborative, yeah.
I think the metaverse, since it's so much accelerated in terms of iteration of design versionings, and you can even have kinetic and transformable elements, and that's one huge advantage for learning about usage. And so let's say initially only about metaverse usage, but I think there's a big transfer over to physical interaction, because in the end we're human beings who would recognize each other, gather into various diagrams and shift from one situation to another to have a kind of satisfying experience of an evening where we're going to join a larger group, then a one-to-one, and then a small group, and then see things, etc. So this parallel is very important. So we have this opportunity, and architecture is just the framing, just setting up and inviting and communicating the situation you want to gather and the experience you want to have in space. And so therefore what we can generate much more variety, and we can also have a much easier and quicker way of tracking and understanding the success and the pickup. So we basically recording the interactions and the situations and the density of people. We could do that with sensors in the physical world, but it's much more involved and difficult. And therefore you get into this kind of iterative perfectioning of these situations, a bit like a website where they have not only click rates, but where your mouse was and what and maybe in the metaverse also where you're looking at. So feeding that into kind of evolutionary design optimization, I think that's an intellectually very fascinating, but also real situation for us to develop a social functionality in architecture, which has nothing to do, I like this. Is it working? Is it is it happening? And I just want to make one more comment. I mean, before COVID and my kind of jumping into the metaverse, we used the kind of gaming world for gaming AI precisely with respect to the NPCs and the way they've been populating games, physical spatial cities, and therefore you can see that you have to develop agent-based models, agent-based models which are not just kind of circulatory crowds, but they have schedules, they have identities, they have variety. So we have this whole kind of social functionality simulation for the physical world using gaming technology transfer, and now this equally is valid for virtual worlds. And so that sort of maybe answers your question, that this is much facilitated, and I think there will be huge progress feeding back into physical, understanding social functionality in the way we interact, and what also, the psychology of perception, what I can grasp, recognition densities, and also the design of kinetic transformable architectures. We're now looking at kind of 25 years of interactive installations which are still only in the art gallery, never functioning, never fulfilling any purpose. We have all this world of sensors and actuators and experiments of when you move here, something happens there, etc. This is a paradigm which should come into architecture, but I predict it will happen in the metaverse first, because it's a lot of thinking through, a lot of understanding the situation, how kind of architectural agents, learning architectural agents could facilitate the events we would like to have, break up boring crowds and cajole larger ones. That will happening in the metaverse. And then again, I think the metaverse will be this fantastic thing on its own, but it's also this fantastic innovation agent for the architectural discipline as a whole, because it's the architectural. And we're doing as architecture, we're learning a lot, and then we'll inject it back into the physical architecture, which will also be make a boost forward. And by the way, parametrism is in the metaverse, and is finally the paradigm which hasn't really arrived in the physical world. But through the metaverse, it will eventually become what it should become, the global epochal paradigm for the 21st century.
Ollie, so like crowdsourced content and then co-creating things using live web-based technology.
Yeah, I think it could be super powerful architects, like co-creating, going back to my first point of like actually getting user input from what we design. We're not very good at that. And I can't remember, the second point was like co-knowledge. I'm not quite sure the word, but like, again, as architects, I think we can really use some of that. But I think from all of the questions everyone's asked, I think the metaverse is like this, it could be anything. It's literally limitless. There's going to have to be a framework of some kind, whether that's to do with how things are categorized in typologies, whether it's capitalist, whether it's free. And in the metaverse world, that has to be some kind of blockchain-based rule set system or something like that. That's where my mind has come to with all these questions. And maybe it's more some blockchain innovation that's going to actually give life to the metaverse in some more physical way. But
well, participatory design has been existing forever in architecture. The fact that you have not been using it is not because you didn't have a metaverse. Okay, let's be clear about that. So I think there is a lot of discussions. All of the people who spoke have a very particular way of being quite idealistic about the things that they were saying, and rightly so. I mean, you're at that age where that is absolutely appropriate. But then at the end of the day, we need to think of the greater economics of the things that we're discussing. All that content needs to be created by somebody who needs to be paid. It needs to be hosted on a cloud that needs to be paid by kind of Nvidia, let's say, hardware that needs to be paid and hosted, right? Who's going to pay for all that? And if Elon Musk is willing to come and do it, be my guest and go and ask him, I don't really think that's going to be the case. So I think, let me finish. I've been interrupted enough. So I think overall, there are the idealism of what this thing could be and could do, which is wonderful. We need to think about it. But there is also the actual economic value of what this thing is. And there needs to be some significant truth in between. And we need to understand what that truth is, because otherwise, none of these kind of extremes, I think, actually work. And they don't work really well, and they never have. But let's not kid ourselves that the metaverse is going to kind of create all these new avenues of interaction with each other, because we have that capability. We're human beings, we're social beings. Aristotle said that 2,500 years ago, right? And so if you wanted to have somebody participate in your design, there were entire kind of design scenarios of that in the 70s that did it. They didn't do it digitally and they did it physically, and it did not succeed for very particular reasons, because there are particular dynamics in the crowds and the decision making that did not facilitate for better design at the end of the day, and that was the reality of it, right? So let's put idealism and economics together, and maybe somewhere in between, Francis is smiling, we may find the solution.
Okay, so we're going to finish now. I'm just going to run through some announcements, then I'll thank the speakers, and we'll continue the conversation upstairs. Basically, we have a support service. If you're not an architect, if you're a technologist, if you're a scanning company, we'd love to work with you to help build out this thing. I want to announce these things very quickly, because we have tons of interesting collaborations that are falling on us, and we're very lucky. One of our co-founders is Spaceform, co-CEO Jan Hoyf. Squint Opera partly owns them. They are an Unreal Engine-based visualization tool, and they have a pipeline for asset conversion, which we are starting to use. The company that does monitoring for Apple's carbon sequestration, forest cover, space intelligence, is getting involved with our index tool. Our index tool is basically a fully map-based tool to essentially put every location in the world, real estate and otherwise, into a spatial system. And so essentially we have a map-based tool that is allowing us to, we have a volumetric model of every building in the world, and essentially in principle putting map pins on them, so that whether you want data from it, models from it, if you have models of it because you're the owner of it, or if you're anywhere in the world and you have a location that you want to scan or you want to be scanned, we are rolling this out. This isn't full product ready, but technically it's ready. We have our first partner. So basically, if you want a model of Mont Blanc, we'll help you with that. If you have data, weather data or whatever from place on the Earth, we'll help you with that. Space Intelligence does satellite forest monitoring, and they're putting their data sets in Treasury on the index. So we'll be licensing their data. We have a fingerprint project led by Sharjah that we'll gradually be launching. Ken and others are involved in that. We have creative partners and some lawyer partners, and we have a science program, which I'll just mention, for people doing medicine and research using spatial assets. So all these conversations are part of a whole series. So if you go to the website, you'll see a bunch more that's coming up. This one is going to reoccur in London in 6 months' time in December. This is an example of our science conversations. They're accelerating. So if you do science applications via medical applications, we have a whole separate thing on that. We have a demo series in San Francisco. We'd love to start that in London if you want to partner. We love that, while you're fiddling with devices and hacking things and doing things. And that's basically it. Please join in. If you are making things you want to register fingerprint and or license there, if you want spatial assets from Zaha and other creators, go there. If you want to find out more, go there. If you want to read up some of our thinking on this, we have an Apple Vision article that sort of frames how we think about spatial computing, and a more technical paper on could the convergence of technologies. So it's just a start. Hope it's useful. These guys have led the conversation. Patrick, Martha, and Ollie have been troopers. And next time we do it, Catherine's going to have to help us manage the panel, I think. So we'll look. Sincerely, I would like your advice on how we constitute the next panel, because these conversations will not stop. As I said at the beginning, these are just questions. Hopefully we're contributing. You can tell us how to do it better. Thank you very much for coming.